Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Katie Sepich. On the morning of August 31st, 2003, the lifeless body of 22-year-old Katie Sepich was discovered near a remote landfill in the desert of Las Cruces, New Mexico. She had last been seen by friends as she left a local house party following a night of bar hopping. It would take almost 4 years to identify her killer. Katie, a 22-year-old woman, was described by her mom as outspoken, vivacious, and intelligent. She grew up in Carlsbad, New Mexico, as the oldest of 3 siblings. After graduating with a business degree from New Mexico State University, she was planning to start graduate school in the fall to pursue her MBA. At the time, Katie worked as a waitress at a local Mexican restaurant. Katie was an extremely outgoing individual who formed a close bond with a guy named Joe Bishoff while attending university. Initially, their connection was platonic, but it soon blossomed into romance. Katie confided in her mother, Jeanne, about her deep-seated happiness with Joe and her desire to forge a long-term partnership with him. A short while later, Joe presented her with a diamond engagement ring. After graduating from university in the summer of 2003, Katie and Joe's relationship faced challenges. While Katie opted to pursue further studies at the university, Joe moved back to his parents' place in Gallup, New Mexico, a small city approximately 350 miles away from Las Cruces. Katie was devastated when Joe had to depart. Although their long-distance relationship was extremely challenging, they still found ways to reunite occasionally. During the Labor Day weekend of 2003, Joe visited Las Cruces, and Katie was ecstatic. Sadly, their brief time together took a tragic turn. On Saturday, August 30th, 2003, Katie spent the evening with Joe and their friends, bar hopping before heading to a local house party. However, after the party, Katie vanished. The following day, Katie's mom, Jan, received a life-changing phone call. As a mother, Jane cherished Katie, her remarkable, outgoing, vibrant, and intelligent daughter, who always lit up the room with her infectious laughter. Katie's roommate was on the other end of the line, desperately seeking Jane's help in locating Katie, having already contacted all her friends and local hospitals, but to no avail, with no sign of Katie anywhere. Veronica, who shared a room with Katie, informed Jana that Katie had departed from the party by herself that evening. Although Veronica and Joe had assumed Katie had gone home, they fell asleep at the party venue, only to discover the next morning that she was missing. Katie's family subsequently contacted the police to report her disappearance. Around the same time, a partially clothed female body was found near a desert landfill. Although there was no identification nearby, police officers who responded to the scene determined that the body had been there for less than 24 hours. It was clear to them that the woman's death was not accidental. The victim was estimated to be between 20 and 25 years old, and her partial nudity, from the waist down, suggested that the motive behind the crime was likely sexual. She had defensive wounds on her arms, suggesting she fought back against her attacker and scratched them in the process. The police found skin cells from the assaillant under her fingernails, which provided a crucial DNA sample. There were also signs of strangulation on her neck, indicating this was likely the cause of her death. Despite this, there was no evidence of a struggle at the scene where the body was found, leading investigators to believe she died elsewhere. It appeared the killer moved her body to the remote desert landfill in an attempt to delay its discovery. On the victim's body, another shocking discovery was made. Burn marks were found on her arms and back. These marks suggested that the perpetrator attempted to either dispose of the body or destroy evidence, and in doing so, they intentionally set the victim on fire. The police quickly linked Katie's disappearance to the discovery of a young woman's body. Katie's father then went to the mortuary to identify the body. According to Katie's mother, Jeanne, after a few hours of agonizing uncertainty, their worst fears were confirmed. The body was indeed Katie's. The pain was overwhelming, and they were consumed by grief. They felt trapped in a desperate situation with no escape, as if all happiness and hope had been lost, leaving no future ahead. Katie's father was required to identify the body of his beloved daughter. He later recounted to the investigators that when they pulled back the sheet, revealing her bruised and contorted face, he was overcome with emotion, dropped to his knees, and prayed to God to take his own life, overwhelmed by grief. The residents of Las Cruces, once a peaceful place, were left horrified by the traumatic event that befell Katie. With a sense of urgency, the police launched an extensive investigation to apprehend the perpetrator as quickly as possible, largely driven by the fear that this individual might strike again. To better understand Katie's case, the police started by reconstructing the final hours of her life. They sought to establish her whereabouts, her companions, and her activities during that time, as well as whether she had any altercations or enemies. Since the party venue was approximately a mile from Katie's home, the police had to ascertain whether she had managed to return home safely. The investigators' first interviews were with Veronica, Katie's roommate, and Joe, her boyfriend. It struck them as odd that these two had stayed at the party while Katie had departed alone in the middle of the night. Joe displayed a lack of willingness to cooperate with the police, stating that Katie had left the party of her own accord and had intentionally left behind her purse, phone, and keys. The detectives thoroughly examined Katie's route, conducting a door-to-door inquiry and speaking with local residents. But regrettably, no one witnessed or overheard anything unusual. A promising lead indicated that Katie had arrived at her house but failed to enter, as she had departed without her keys. The investigators conducted a thorough search of the house and its surroundings, discovering Katie's shoes outside her bedroom window. It seemed that she had attempted to re-enter the house through the window, but was suddenly attacked. The footprints in the gravel beside the house supported this theory. Katie had put up a fierce fight for her life, but unfortunately, her attacker proved to be stronger. The investigators proposed that after killing Katie, the perpetrator transported her body to the desert landfill and attempted to burn it. They started questioning whether the perpetrator was a stranger or someone Katie knew and trusted. Since around 40 people had attended the party, the investigators looked into the possibility that someone might have trailed Katie when she went home and attacked her, possibly even her boyfriend Joe. When the police questioned Joe again, they told him they were aware that he and Katie had a dispute because she caught him kissing another girl. Joe confirmed this was true and stated that after Katie left, he followed her in his car. But he didn't enter her home because he saw her bedroom light was off and thought she was asleep. So he went back to the party. The investigators stumbled upon another peculiar aspect of Joe's behavior. After leaving the party, he frequently dialed Katie's cell phone, which was still in her purse, and persisted in doing so until morning. The question was whether Joe was attempting to establish an alibi for himself or feigned concern for Katie's well-being. The investigators wanted Joe to explain his suspicious behavior, but he refused to cooperate with them any further. Despite loving Joe deeply, Katie's family was shocked when he failed to attend her funeral, which only fueled their suspicions. In the end, the investigators only needed one thing to clear Joe's name: a DNA sample. Experts discovered DNA samples at 3 different locations on Katie's body, with most of it located under her fingernails. The DNA was identified as human skin cells. Notably, all the DNA samples found on Katie's body came from the same individual. The police were keen to compare Joe's DNA with the DNA recovered from Katie's body, but they faced obstacles in doing so. At the time, Joe was out of town, and his parents had hired a lawyer who informed the investigators that Joe had declined to provide a DNA sample for testing. It was clear to everyone that Joe was hiding something and was likely involved in Katie's death, judging by his behavior. The police were convinced of his guilt, but they needed to find a legal way to obtain his DNA to confirm their suspicions, which took some time. At the same time, investigators were examining alternative explanations. They were researching similar crimes to determine if Katie was the sole victim of whoever ended her life. The DNA samples discovered on her body were compared to a national database, but no matches were found. The investigators went back to the starting point of their inquiry, the party where everything began. They managed to track down all the male guests who had attended the party and requested that each of them provide a DNA sample. Every single one of them complied, since they claimed to have nothing to conceal. Nevertheless, the results of the DNA analysis did not yield any matches with the DNA traces found on Katie's body. This lack of a match led the investigators to refocus their attention on Joe, the solitary individual who had declined to provide his DNA sample. The investigators discovered an alternative approach. Prior to attending the party, Katie and Joe had spent time in her bedroom, where they had been physically intimate. The police subsequently visited the house and collected the sheet from Katie's bed, suspecting they might find Joe's DNA on it. Their hunch proved correct. The laboratory analysis did reveal a sample of male DNA, but it did not correspond to the DNA found on Katie's body. This meant that Joe was not the perpetrator who attacked her. If Joe wasn't involved in what happened to his girlfriend, why did he initially refuse to cooperate with the police? Once the police sent the test results to his lawyer, Joe discovered he had been cleared as a suspect. Following this, Joe changed his mind and decided to talk to the police again, even providing a DNA sample. The new test results confirmed the initial finding. Joe was innocent of the crime. Joe refused to cooperate with the police because he had previously had intimate contact with Katie before the party, and he feared they would discover his DNA on her body. Despite their best efforts, the police and Katie's family couldn't understand Joe's behavior on the night of her death. After Joe was cleared as a suspect, the police had to explore alternative theories. Several partygoers informed the investigators that Katie was wearing rings on her fingers that night, including one given to her by Joe. However, when Katie's body was found, her fingers were bare. The police suspected that the killer had removed the rings. They searched all local pawn shops, but failed to find Katie's stolen jewelry. Near where Katie's body was discovered, another potential lead emerged in the form of tire tracks. Forensic experts successfully identified the brand and model of the tires in question. Upon contacting the manufacturer, the police learned that these specific tires are typically fitted to pickup trucks. Regrettably, this new information failed to bring the authorities any closer to catching the perpetrator, and the case ultimately stalled. About a year after Katie's incident, a similar crime occurred in Wisconsin. In Green Bay, a girl was attacked and suffered the same brutal fate as Katie. She was also set on fire, but miraculously, she managed to survive. The victim credited her survival to feigning death, which led the attackers to leave her. Once they were gone, she put out the flames and sought help at a nearby residence. She claimed to have been attacked by two Hispanic males, but the evidence in Katie's case suggested only one perpetrator was involved. To determine if there was a link between the two crimes, DNA analysis was necessary. The victim from Wisconsin provided a detailed description of her attackers to the police. When the Green Bay police released the composite sketches, a local farmer recognized the men as his employees, Gregorio Morales and Juan, since one of them had relatives in Las Cruces and often visited them. As a result, both men were arrested, and the police investigating Katie's case believed they had finally identified the culprit. However, the results of the DNA examination proved otherwise. The samples did not match the DNA found on Katie's body. These two men were later convicted of assaulting a girl in Green Bay, but they were not connected to the Katie case. Morales was sentenced to 50 years in prison and Gregorio to 50 years. Thus, the investigators reached another dead end. The only evidence the police had were tire tracks from the crime scene and DNA samples of the perpetrator. Katie's family hoped that DNA would allow the police to identify the person who took their daughter's life, but there were problems with that. It was not legal to take a DNA sample from anyone arrested by the police. GN, Katie's mom expressed her surprise and frustration about this. They had lost their daughter to a monster, and they needed justice, to know who had done this and why. And most of all, they needed to know that he would be stopped from doing this again. The detective leading Katie's case informed GN that the only evidence they possessed was DNA. During her fierce struggle to survive, Katie had managed to collect her killer's blood and skin underneath her fingernails. The police had successfully extracted a DNA profile from this evidence and uploaded it into CODIS, a national forensic database. Detective Jones clarified that every week, this DNA evidence would be automatically cross-checked against the offender database to search for a potential match. This news brought renewed hope to Katie's family, as they were confident that they would eventually identify their daughter's killer once a matching profile was found. Detective Gian casually mentioned that the perpetrator was such a menace he'd likely be arrested again soon, at which point his DNA would be collected and entered into the system, leading to his identification and eventual conviction. However, Detective Jones contradicted him, explaining that this process isn't possible in New Mexico or most other states, as it's against the law to collect DNA samples from someone simply because they've been arrested. 3.5 years after Katie's death, a significant breakthrough occurred in the case on December 18, 2006. A DNA sample was discovered that matched the DNA evidence found on Katie's body. The attacker was identified as 26-year-old Gabriel Avila, a married father of one who had no prior connection to Katie. Notably, Avila had a lengthy criminal history and had been released from prison just shortly before Katie's murder on November 13, 2003. Less than 3 months after killing Katie, Avila was caught and arrested for breaking into an apartment shared by 2 young women carrying a knife. Fortunately, the college roommates managed to avoid an attack by locking themselves in the bathroom and quickly calling the police. In March 2004, Avila was found guilty of aggravated burglary with the intention of committing aggravated assault. However, after being released on bail, Avila fled instead of facing justice. Avila could have been caught and arrested just 3 months after Katie's attack, but due to flaws in the system, it took 3.5 years to establish a connection between him and Katie's death. Avila evaded police for almost a year before being caught in November 2004, thanks to a tip. He received a 9-year prison sentence, and a DNA sample was taken when he entered prison, but it sat untested for another 2 years. When the results finally came back, showing a partial match to DNA from Katie's crime scene, investigators sprang into action, tracking down the truck Avila used to dispose of her body, where they found a ring that belonged to Katie. This case highlights the need for system change. The police wasted resources and time searching for the perpetrator for 3 years, which could have been avoided if they had taken a DNA sample from Avila during his initial arrest. Moreover, it is astonishing that his DNA sample was only tested 2 years later, in 2006. Detectives investigating Katie's case visited Avila in prison after finding her ring in his pickup truck. Avila confessed to the crime, explaining that he had been in the area that night to buy illegal substances while his wife was away. He claimed that he offered Katie a ride when he saw her, but she declined. Later, he saw her again outside her house and stopped to offer help when she said she couldn't get in because she didn't have her purse. Katie tried to climb into her bedroom window, but Avila attacked and undressed her. Unsure what to do next, Avila strangled Katie, fearing she would identify him later. He then put her body in his pickup truck and drove to a desert landfill, where he dumped her body and attempted to set it on fire to destroy evidence, but his plan failed. Avila's DNA sample was recollected, and it matched DNA evidence found on Katie's body from 2003. Her parents were hopeful this new finding would lead to a swift investigation. However, they were shocked to discover that, in New Mexico and nearly every other state, it was illegal to collect DNA samples from individuals upon arrest. Instead, DNA was only entered into the system after someone had been convicted and sentenced to prison. This discovery prompted Katie's parents to launch a nationwide campaign, seeking to pass a law in all 50 states requiring individuals arrested for violent crimes to provide a DNA sample. The DNA would then be added to the CODIS national database, facilitating investigations and potentially solving crimes. In 2006, Katie's law was passed by the New Mexico state legislature with a near-unanimous vote of only 5 dissenting voices, and was subsequently signed into law in March 2006. Following the relentless advocacy of Katie's parents, the legislation was eventually adopted at the federal level in 2010. To date, over 31 states have enacted laws similar to New Mexico's Katie's Law. Katie's father, David, had long feared that another person would suffer the same fate as his daughter at the hands of her killer. But with the law now in place, he can finally find some comfort and relief. Opponents of this policy argue it invades privacy and violates civil rights, while others note that DNA, unlike fingerprints, contains sensitive genetic information. In the case of United States versus Kincaid, a federal district court ruled that collecting DNA samples before conviction and including them in the National DNA Database does not violate constitutional rights. In 2017, Gabriel Avila's trial got underway. During the proceedings, Avila offered a heartfelt apology to Katie's family. His lawyer pleaded with the judge to show mercy, citing Avila's remorsefulness as a mitigating factor. District Attorney Susana Martinez countered that Avila had delayed his confession for over 3 years, only coming forward when confronted with irrefutable DNA evidence by detectives. At the sentencing hearing, Katie's father, David, addressed the judge, imploring him not to be lenient with the punishment. He argued that his family would never have the opportunity to see Katie again, and it was only fair that the person responsible for her death should not be allowed to experience freedom again in their own lifetime. In May 2007, Gabriel Avila was found guilty and received a 69-year prison sentence. He will be eligible for parole in 2043 after serving 30 years of his sentence. Jenna believes that true closure is unattainable, but she is now ready to move forward. She, her husband, and their 2 other children have been healing and progressing with their lives, and they cherish their remaining kids deeply. Additionally, Jenny has pledged that she and her husband will persist in their efforts to have Katie's Law enacted in all 50 states as a testament to their deceased daughter. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Allison Baden Clay. Allison Baden was born on July 1, 1968 in a Brisbane suburb. Raised in an affluent family, she developed a passion for ballet early on. After school, she pursued higher education, excelling academically and mastering 6 languages. At 25 in 1993, Allison won a local beauty pageant, showcasing her ballet skills. Following university, she secured a position in the HR department at Brisbane's Flight Centre, where her career quickly advanced, recognized by her boss as a bright and promising talent. It was here that Allison met Gerard, who would later become her husband. Gerard Baden Clay was born on September 9, 1970, in Bournemouth, UK. He came from a notable lineage, with his great-grandfather, Robert Baden Powell, being a famed British military leader and founder of the Scouting movement. Gerard was just a year old when his family moved to Zambia, his father Nigel Clay's homeland. After 8 years in Zambia, they immigrated to Australia. Gerard completed his education in Australia and pursued a degree in accounting. He eventually joined the Flight Centre for work, where he met Allison's. It was at the Flight Centre where Gerard encountered Allison, leading to a blossoming relationship. Gerard and Allison Baden Clay exchanged vows on August 23, 1997. Following their nuptials, they embarked on a global tour, including stops in South America, Switzerland, and a stint in London. Once back in Australia, Allison resumed her career at the Flight Centre, eventually rising to a management position. In 2002, she became pregnant and later gave birth to their first child, Hannah. After Hannah's birth, Allison chose to dedicate herself entirely to family life. During this period, Gerard explored various occupations and established a premium real estate agency in Brisbane in 2004, with his parents' involvement in the business. Known for his lively and self-assured demeanor, Gerard dedicated substantial time and effort to his work. The family grew with the birth of their second daughter, Sarah, in 2004, and their youngest, Ella, in 2006. They lived in a verdant home situated in the suburban area of Brookfield, Brisbane. Allison, primarily a homemaker, was deeply engaged in caring for her daughters. Over time, Allison noticed that Gerard was becoming increasingly distant and aloof. This reached a climax when he made the shocking admission that he no longer loved her. Gerard's behavior towards Allison changed, with him frequently criticizing her. He would berate her for making unappealing meals or for not keeping their home clean, sometimes labeling Allison as lazy and expressing that she no longer appealed to him romantically. In the face of these remarks, Allison chose to remain quiet, enduring the harshness of his words. She maintained a personal diary where she documented her enduring love for Gerard, the recurring disputes at home, her own feelings of guilt, and her determination to correct her perceived faults in hopes of rekindling his affection. Despite the turmoil within her family life, Allison managed to mask her inner struggles with an outward appearance of cheerfulness. She was consistently seen as a warm, benevolent individual, a devoted mother, and a loving spouse. In 2011, after the devastating floods in Queensland, Gerard's business faced financial difficulties, accumulating debts of approximately $1 million Australian dollars. That October, Allison discovered that Gerard was engaged in a secret affair with Tony McHugh, a colleague at his agency. Gerard and Tony had first crossed paths in 2008 when she was a client, and later, he hired her. At that time, Tony, a 17-year marriage veteran with children, was experiencing marital troubles. The affair with Gerard quickly escalated, culminating in her divorce. Tony was aware of Gerard's marital status. He had portrayed his relationship with Allison as platonic, claiming their marriage lacked intimacy and that he remained with Allison solely for their daughters. Gerard assured Tony of a future together, including marriage. However, after nearly 4 years, Gerard had still not initiated divorce proceedings when Allison discovered the affair in October 2011. Gerard informed Tony that they had to end their relationship. He terminated the affair, dismissed Tony from his real estate business, and reconciled with his wife without Tony, who held on to the hope of a future together. 4 months later, Tony and Gerard were conversing over the phone while she drove home. They talked about an upcoming real estate conference scheduled for the next day. Unexpectedly, Gerard mentioned that Tony would encounter Allison there. Upset by this foreseen development, Tony questioned Gerard's delay in telling her and accused him of habitual dishonesty in response to her frustration and doubts about their future. Gerard apologized, reaffirmed his love, and reiterated his commitment to divorcing within 3 months. He emphasized his intention to leave Allison, mentioning her mental health struggles. The following morning, on April 20th at 7:14 a.m., a distressed Gerard contacted the police, reporting Allison's disappearance after a walk around 10 p.m. the previous night. Upon arrival at the Bowden Clay home, police observed deep curved scratches on Gerard's face, which he attributed to a shaving accident. During a further examination for photographs, police noticed small red marks on his chest, which Gerard explained as bites from a caterpillar encountered while changing an outdoor light. The house inspection revealed no overt signs of disturbance. It was orderly with the bed neatly made. Gerard was composed, getting his daughters ready for school and daycare. Police interviewed Hannah, Sarah, and Ella, who recalled falling asleep to their mother's lullabies and hadn't seen her since she turned off the light. The girls, tearful during questioning, described their parents as generally happy and good to each other. The police initiated a search in the vicinity and interviewed neighbors for any leads on Allison's whereabouts, but no one reported seeing or hearing anything out of the ordinary. The only clues discovered that day were a small blood stain in Allison's car and a strand of her hair in the trunk. A larger-scale search operation was soon underway, with rescue teams and volunteers scouring the nearby woods, wells, shafts, and dams close to the Bowden Clay residence. A mannequin was placed, dressed similarly to Allison's last known attire, to aid in the search efforts. As time progressed, the likelihood of finding Allison alive diminished. Her friends clung to hope, unwilling to consider the worst. Gerard, visibly distraught, tearfully spoke to the media, yearning for his wife's return. Concurrently, he advised his mistress, Toni, to halt their communication and keep a low profile, promising that they would eventually be together. A decade after Allison vanished, on April 30th, 2012, a boater found a decomposed body by the Colo Creek riverbank, around 8 miles from the Bowden Clay home. The next day, Gerard reached out to the insurance company to discuss claiming his wife's life insurance, valued at $800,000 Australian dollars. Shortly after, the body discovered under the bridge was confirmed as the 43-year-old Allison Bowden Clay by a medical examiner. The advanced decomposition made determining the exact cause of death challenging. Dental records confirmed Allison's identity, and she was dressed in the same outfit as when she disappeared. Forensic indications pointed to possible strangulation, leading to the classification of her death as a homicide. On May 11, 2012, St. Paul's Church hosted Allison Bowden Clay's funeral. Gerard, visibly distraught, shed tears throughout the service, consoling his daughters and extending solace to Allison's parents. The ceremony saw a large turnout, with hundreds in attendance. Concurrently, Gerard maintained discreet contact with his mistress, Toni, using public phones for communication. He apprised her of the tragic circumstances surrounding his wife's death and implored Toni to keep their clandestine relationship hidden from police inquiries. Gerard maintained his claim that Allison had gone for a walk around 10 p.m. and was gone by the time he woke up. However, contradictory evidence emerged. Detectives found that Gerard had charged his phone at 2 a.m. and was on his computer at 5 a.m., searching for information about the right to remain silent. Forensic analysis contradicted his claim of shaving cuts, suggesting the marks on his cheek resembled fingernail scratches. Additionally, no blood was detected on his razor. A biologist challenged Gerard's explanation of caterpillar bites on his chest, noting the absence of such caterpillars in the family's area that could have caused such marks. A botanical specialist concluded that the marks were not consistent with caterpillar bites. When Allison's body was discovered, her hair contained 5 distinct leaf types: eucalyptus, Chinese elm, crepe myrtle, cat's claw vine, and fishbone fern. Notably, 2 of these varieties, eucalyptus and Chinese elm, grew directly under the bridge where her body was found. Significantly, all 5 types of leaves and thorns were present in the backyard of the Bowden Clay family residence a month after Allison's funeral on June 13, 2012. 41-year-old Gerard Bowden Clay was arrested and charged with his wife's murder. Asserting his innocence, he vowed to fight the charges and sought bail, which was promptly denied due to concerns he might flee during questioning. Investigators contacted Toni, who disclosed the truth about their 4-year clandestine relationship. Notably, just days before Allison's disappearance, Gerard had sent Toni a letter promising that he would be with her by July 1st. The prosecution alleged that Gerard Bowden Clay murdered Allison to claim an insurance payout, clear his debts, and start anew with Toni McHugh. They theorized that on the night of April 19, 2012, after putting their daughters to bed, Allison joined Gerard to watch TV. An intense argument is believed to have erupted, during which Allison scratched Gerard's cheek. DNA traces were found under Allison's nails, but their origin was undetermined due to degradation. The prosecution suggested that Gerard strangled Allison, dragged her body through the backyard, entangling her hair with leaves, then transported her in her car's trunk to the river, disposing of her body under a bridge. They believed Gerard expected the river to wash the body away, concealing his crime. He reportedly returned home, charged his phone, cleaned the house, and reported Allison missing the next morning. After the discovery of the body, he sought legal counsel for criminal defense and visited the lawyer's office. At the June 2014 murder trial of Allison Bowden Clay, The prosecution adamantly argued for Gerard's guilt. Gerard, however, steadfastly denied any involvement. In court, he admitted to a dispute with Allison, suggesting she might have left home late at night and, in her depressive state, possibly chosen to end her life. This theory was staunchly rejected by Allison's family and friends, who were convinced of her unwavering commitment to her daughters, believing she would never abandon them. Her friends voiced long-standing disapproval of Gerard, describing him as arrogant, disingenuous, and conceited, and believed Allison's deep love for him blinded her to these negative traits. At the trial, excerpts from Allison Baden-Clay's diary were presented, revealing her sense of isolation and control by Gerard, especially after their first child's birth. She felt lonely, confined to the home, and detailed Gerard's controlling behavior, including insulting her, tracking her conversations through a baby monitor, managing her finances, erasing relatives' contacts from her phone, and blocking their calls. Following Allison's demise, Gerard's attempt to claim the insurance payout was rejected, with the funds being withheld pending the trial's conclusion. Another key testimony came from Melissa Romano, who had never met Gerard in person, but spoke with him on the phone in 2009 regarding a real estate deal. She testified that after finalizing the deal, Gerard made a startling call to her, proposing, "I'm looking for someone to kill my wife." Romano, taken aback, questioned his motive, but Gerard abruptly shifted the conversation and ended the call, leaving the statement unresolved. Gerard Baden-Clay was convicted on July 15, 2014, and sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole after 15 years. In 2015, he challenged his sentence, leading to a court ruling that the murder was unintentional and thus reducing his prison term. This verdict, however, triggered a massive public outcry, culminating in protests with about 4,000 participants, standing in solidarity with Allison's family. Responding to the public sentiment, in 2016, the High Court of Australia overturned the appellate court's decision, reinstating the original murder conviction. Consequently, Gerard Baden-Clay's parole eligibility has been deferred until at least 2027, while incarcerated. Initially, Gerard conducted himself as an exemplary inmate, but as time progressed, he adapted to prison life and became less restrained in his behavior, leading to an incident where he inappropriately touched a prison guard, resulting in a stern reprimand during his imprisonment. Gerard Baden-Clay also established a friendship with a 73-year-old businessman and millionaire, John Chardin, who was imprisoned for the manslaughter of his wife. Additionally, he developed a rapport with Mayan Carouse, a convict serving time for the triple homicide of his girlfriend and her two siblings. Following the trial of Gerard Baden-Clay, his former mistress, Toni McHugh, moved to Bali, where she engaged in teaching and charity work. 4 years later, she relocated to the United Arab Emirates to continue her career in education. McHugh now leads a modest lifestyle and keeps her personal details under wraps. She occasionally connects with friends via social media using an anonymous account, cautious of Baden-Clay potentially locating her post-release. In her most recent media interaction, McHugh expressed remorse about the situation and clarified that she never intended harm to Allison. She also disclosed that Baden-Clay and Clay had been unfaithful to Allison with not only her but other women as well, including Hannah, Sarah, and Ella, the daughters of Gerard and Allison Baden-Clay. The children, Hannah, Sarah, and Ella, are being cared for by their maternal grandparents, Allison's parents. The entirety of Allison's estate, including any insurance money, was entrusted to her children in 2022. The eldest daughter, Hannah Baden-Clay, has completed her university education and has pursued a career in dancing, following in her mother's footsteps to honor Allison's memory. To address the critical issue of domestic violence, Allison's sister, Vanessa, founded a charitable organization dedicated to combating domestic abuse, raising awareness, and providing support to those impacted by such situations. Through this case, being able to recognize the signs of domestic and family violence is a crucial first step towards prevention. In Allison's case, there were numerous indicators, some more conspicuous than others. These signs included, but were not limited to, a sense of isolation from friends, family, and support systems, a significant degree of control over financial resources, and a gradual erosion of self-confidence and self-worth. Identifying these things early on is essential in order to address the underlying issues and provide the necessary support and resources to those affected by domestic and family violence. By being vigilant and attuned to the subtle and overt manifestations of this complex issue, we can take proactive measures to foster safer and more supportive environments for individuals and families. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Celeste Mano. Celeste Mano's story began quite harmlessly. She was receiving attention from a work colleague which she consistently ignored. She sincerely hoped that her admirer would soon understand and just leave her alone. However, one careless action by Celeste drastically changed everything, turning her suitor into an obsessed pursuer. Another thoughtless act led to irreversible consequences. Celeste Cristano was born on November 30th, 1997, in the northeastern part of Melbourne in Victoria State, Australia. She was the youngest of two children to parents Eggy Diero and Tony Mano. She grew up alongside her older brother named Alessandro. According to some accounts, their father left his wife when the children were still small and soon remarried. However, he always maintained contact with his older offspring, supported them financially, and tried to be actively involved in their lives. During her school years, Celeste was quite sociable, active, and friendly. She engaged in sports and dance, served as the captain of the cheerleading team, and had big plans for her future. Initially, she dreamed of becoming a lawyer and enrolled in the prestigious University of Melbourne, studying criminal and civil law. However, towards the end of her studies, she found law dull and began studying advertising and marketing. In 2018, she was hired by a large and rapidly growing company that sold various goods on e-commerce platforms. Smart and talented, Celeste quickly grasped everything on the fly. She successfully fulfilled her duties and rapidly ascended the career ladder. From a simple call center worker, she became the head of an entire department in less than 2 years. Considered one of the most promising employees, everyone admired her intelligence, initiative, and ability to organize work competently. Moreover, Celeste possessed outstanding external attributes and a flawless figure. During her university years, she even participated in the university beauty contest and was among the top 3 leaders. She always had many admirers from a young age, but was meticulous in choosing partners. Among her colleagues was Luis Sacco. He worked at the company nearly 16 years older than her and showed a lively interest in Celeste from her first days at the office. Worth noting is that Luis Sacco was quite reserved and unsociable, evidently lacking career ambitions, as he long occupied the same minor position without desire for development. Kind, smiling, and open, Celeste did not want to hurt Luis Sacco's feelings, so she always politely declined whenever he tried asking her out. Despite this, Lou repeatedly attempted to draw her attention in various ways. Sometimes Celeste would make jokes to lighten the mood, but firmly desired nothing to do with him. His attentions were persistent and awkwardly annoying, but keeping composure, Celeste hoped he would soon give up or shift his focus elsewhere as time passed. Luis Sacco remained relentless, becoming almost obsessed with the young beauty, Celeste Mano. Everyone around him noticed it. One day, Celeste confided in a close colleague that she wouldn't ever consider a relationship with Luis. First, he was odd and unpredictable. Second, she never felt any attraction towards men who lacked ambition and life goals. Third, the significant age gap also played a role. Nonetheless, she did pity him because despite all his efforts, he stood no chance. Unfortunately, Luis Sacco lost focus on his work in his fruitless attempts to win Celeste's attention and affection. Historically, he was a very hard-working employee, but now he completely ignored his job duties and his productivity suffered greatly. Senior management was unhappy with this drop in performance. Luis was given 3 reprimands and warnings. In early autumn of 2019, the company ultimately fired him for his negligence. Lue Sako was very upset by this turn of events. As he packed up his things at the office, it seemed he was about to cry. Celeste experienced mixed feelings. On one hand, she felt relieved that he would disappear from her life and stop bothering her with persistent overtures. But on the other hand, she felt some guilt believing his dismissal partly happened because of her. As a department manager, Celeste thanked Lue for his years of service and escorted him to the building exit. She tried to encourage him with a pat on the shoulder and sincerely wished him luck as they parted ways. However, it turned out this harmless act was a mistake, a catalyst that fueled Louis's belief they could make their relationship work. Instantly, Louis decided that Celeste was simply afraid to start an office romance since she was his boss and feared general disapproval or damage to her career. Now convinced nothing stood in the way of their potential happiness together, Louis, overwhelmed by his emotions, unexpectedly kissed Celeste on the cheek. An awkward pause ensued. Stunned by his audacity, Celeste didn't know how to react, so she just turned around and hurried back into the office building without saying anything. This reaction further convinced Louis that Celeste harbored feelings for him and believed he should not give up pursuing her. Just days after, Louis created a social media account, found Celeste's profile, and sent her a friend request. At first, she accepted it, thinking no harm would come of it. But when he started bombarding her with requests to meet up and go out together, she tried to decline politely. Eventually, she just blocked him. The following day, the former colleague sent another friend request from a newly created profile. Celeste tried to ignore it. However, he began commenting on her photos, praising her looks, and mentioning how great they would be as a couple. She then adjusted her profile settings so only friends could send her messages or comment on her photos or posts. A week later, during a family gathering, she mentioned the persistent pursuer to her relatives. She also recounted the strange incident from the day he was fired. Her family listened but assumed it wasn't serious, and that the unwanted admirer would lose interest and disappear from her life soon. Louis didn't have Celeste's personal phone number while they worked together. They only communicated through work channels. But now Celeste began receiving peculiar romantic messages from an unknown number. She quickly guessed who they were from. The admirer sent romantic poems he had written, praised her beauty again, and tried to convince her to meet up. Celeste answered his call only once in an attempt to have a serious conversation with him. She explained that nothing could happen between them and tried to persuade him to stop pursuing her. Nevertheless, he didn't listen. Instead, he just complimented how pleasant her voice was and expressed how glad he was that she had finally picked up. After this conversation, she tried blocking him again, but each time he'd call from a new number. Eventually, she decided to change her own number. Still within a week or so later, Louis managed to find it out and continued his telephone harassment. Seeking some form of protection for about half a year, Celeste kept unsuccessful attempts at ignoring the crazed admirer. She blocked his numbers and fake social media pages, but he persisted with messages and continually disrupted her usual life. The stream of messages continued, and over time, their nature shifted from romantic to bold and threatening. The man stopped asking politely. He began demanding meetings and detailing his delusional, intimate fantasies about what he intended to do with her immediately. However, that wasn't the worst of it. It became evident that the stalker began following her from work to home, where she lived. Celeste didn't initially realize that Louis was now present in her life beyond just the messages. He was literally tracking her every move. She occasionally glimpsed him near her home, but convinced herself each time that it was merely a product of nerves or imagination. When she finally understood that she was not mistaken and that Louis, with his obsessive behavior, was indeed following her, she decided to seek police protection. Celeste wanted law enforcement to issue a special order prohibiting the stalker from approaching her and her home. However, the officers were indifferent, even mocking at times. According to them, writing poems or expressing explicit fantasies in text messages is neither illegal nor punishable. Since Celeste couldn't provide evidence of Louis following her and lurking near her home, they simply asked her to leave the precinct and not hinder them from catching real criminals. For another 6 months, Celeste continued to endure relentless harassment from her former colleague. During workdays, she frequently noticed his car parked across the street from her office. In the evenings, he would drive past her house several times. She constantly felt his gaze on her, increasing her anxiety and making daily life tense. In August 2020, Celeste approached the police again. This time, she provided photo and video evidence on her phone, showing that Louis was indeed following her. A different officer took her statement this time, an officer who took the situation more seriously and expressed surprise at his colleague's previous indifference. He advised her to immediately go to court, where a restraining order was issued against Louis. He was notified that he could no longer call, approach her, or try to contact her in any other way. Clearly, the man did not expect this turn of events and indeed disappeared from Celeste's sight for a few weeks. She was happy for the first time in a while. She felt free and believed that the harasser would no longer bother her. However, her relief was premature. Less than a month later, she began receiving messages from unknown numbers. Initially, Louis pleaded and then demanded she retract her statement and remove the restraining order, as he believed it interfered with their romantic relationship. After receiving several messages, Celeste immediately went to the police, since her pursuer had violated the restraining order. Now, he had to face the consequences. The man was fined and warned that further violations could lead to much more severe measures. If he didn't leave the young woman alone, he could end up in jail. After this incident, Louis did not make his presence known for almost 2 months. The young woman believed he had finally left her alone. In September 2020, Celeste met a young man named Chris Reedsdale. He was just a year older than her, and they quickly found they had many common interests, views on life, and goals. Consequently, a romantic relationship soon developed between them. She told her new boyfriend about the harassment from her former admirer and confessed that although Louis had not appeared, she still felt anxious. Chris endeavored to surround his girlfriend with care and attention, doing everything to make her feel safe and worry-free. In early November, Celeste invited Chris to a family dinner to introduce him to her parents and brother. Celeste's choice was well received by her family. They quickly hit it off, and her mother even jested that her daughter was now in safe hands. The following weeks passed peacefully, with no sign of the former admirer, who did not attempt to contact Celeste. The young woman found joy in spending all her free time with Chris. It appeared she no longer worried about Louis possibly barging back into her life or causing her any harm. On November 15, 2020, the love-struck couple decided to go out on a date. They sat in a cafe, enjoying each other's company. During this pleasant moment, the young woman suggested they capture it by taking a selfie. The photo turned out very romantic. They were sitting at the same table, embracing, smiling, and looking genuinely happy. Celeste was so fond of this picture that she decided to use it as her profile picture on social media. In doing so, she aimed to share the news of her new relationship and indicate how serious things were between them. Chris also posted the photo on his page with a touching caption about how much he loved Celeste and how he would do everything to keep her eyes sparkling with happiness as depicted in the picture. Unfortunately, this outing would be their last as a couple. On the evening of their final date, Chris dropped Celeste off at her home, and they said goodbye with plans to meet again the next day. Celeste spent about an hour in the kitchen talking with her mother about her boyfriend before heading to bed, since she had to get up early for work the next morning. On Monday, November 16, 2020, around 4 a.m., Eggy was awakened by the sound of breaking glass but didn't immediately grasp what was happening. Then there were suspicious noises. Banging, screams, and commotion followed. At first, it seemed like these noises were coming from outside on the street. However, she soon realized they were emanating from within the house. Eggy leapt out of bed, threw on a robe, and rushed to her daughter's room. She flung open the door and in the dim light saw someone literally jumping away from Celeste's bed before escaping through a broken window. When Eggy turned on the light, she was confronted with a horrifying scene. Her daughter lay in a pool of her own blood, covered in cuts and small shards of broken glass. Celeste was struggling to breathe, gasping for air. Her eyes were wide open, staring upward. Immediately, her mother called emergency services and tried to stem the deep bleeding wounds on her daughter's body until the paramedics arrived. Unfortunately, it was too late. By the time police doctors got there, she had already passed away. The medical examiners later found over 20 penetrating stab wounds on her body, with the fatal blow aimed at her heart. During the investigation, the prime suspect was scrutinized. Analyzing the situation and comparing it with Eggy's testimony, police concluded that the assailant took less than 3 minutes to break into the victim's room through the window and carry out the attack before her mother entered. The suspect used a large butcher's knife, striking randomly, while Celeste tried to defend herself as indicated by numerous cuts on her arms. When asked if her daughter had any enemies, Eggy could only recall one name: Louis Sacco. He had obsessively pursued the young woman for over a year, harassing her with calls and threatening messages. This information was corroborated by other family members as well as friends and colleagues. At the scene, the suspect left many bloody fingerprints, and DNA was found on a fence he jumped over while fleeing since he had injured his hand. It became imperative to detain and interrogate Louis immediately as the prime suspect to verify and compare all evidence and witness statements. Louis was arrested that same day, but initially vehemently denied his involvement in the incident. He insisted that he loved Celeste and would never harm her. Forensic results later confirmed the bloody fingerprints found in the victim's room and on the fence to him. Law enforcement also highlighted the restraining order against approaching the young woman, which he had violated. Additionally, on the evening before the tragedy, it was discovered that Louis had purchased a hammer and a large knife at a local hardware store. This transaction was captured on surveillance cameras at the checkout. Louis used the hammer to break into the house through a window and then used the knife in his fatal attack on the unfortunate woman. A calculated criminal or a man in need of treatment. The evidence against Sacco was undeniable, further underscored by his long-term surveillance of the victim, knowing practically everything about her. The final trigger for him appeared to be a photo posted by the young woman on social media with her new boyfriend. After seeing this, he went to a store, bought a knife and hammer, and under cover of night, went to Celeste's home to end her life. His actions were seen as calculated and premeditated criminal activity. Yet Louis's behavior was quite erratic, raising questions about his mental stability. Notably, at nearly 39 years old, he had never married, continued living with his parents, had almost no friends, and never held a job for long periods. People described him as nervous and introverted with severe socialization issues. Additionally, Louis had a biological brother serving a lengthy sentence for another criminal act at that time. Following these events, a forensic psychiatric evaluation was ordered for Louis, with his attorney insisting that his client required specialized treatment instead of imprisonment. This argument angered and upset the victim's family, who feared that this cruel individual might evade punishment. After interviewing Louis and analyzing his behavior, psychiatric experts concluded he did indeed suffer from some mental disorders. However, and it's important, they determined that at the time of the crime he was fully aware of his actions. Furthermore, he had meticulously planned the crime in advance, carefully considering the details. As a result, despite his efforts to feign insanity, Sacco would inevitably face a trial. The trial and subsequent sentencing did not occur until the autumn of 2023, 3 years after the tragic death of the young woman. During this period, the criminal made several attempts to demonstrate his mental illness, hoping to avoid conviction for deliberate criminal acts. He spent most of this time in a psychiatric facility. In the courtroom, Luis appeared calm and detached, showing little interest in the proceedings. Although he admitted his guilt, he maintained that his intention was not to take the girl's life, but to win her affection. However, the jury unanimously found Luis guilty on all charges. He was then sentenced to 36 years in prison, with the possibility of parole no earlier than 30 years. Celeste's law, which ultimately was not passed, aimed to address the fact that existing laws did not consider online stalking and phone harassment as criminal offenses. The parents of Celeste highlighted that their daughter had sought police protection as early as 2020, but her complaint was not taken seriously due to the limitations of the current legislation. Over the 3-year period leading up to the trial, the mother of the deceased young woman, along with legal experts and activists, collaborated to develop Celeste's law. This law sought to establish criminal accountability for online stalking through social media platforms, text messages, and emails. The hope was that such a law would provide protection for countless women and girls, preventing similar tragedies from occurring. Despite these efforts, the investigations revealed that most online stalkers remained covert and did not attempt any direct contact with their victims. The amendments made to the legislation primarily focused on restricting access to personal information on social media platforms. In cases involving severe stalking with threats, a restraining order could be issued, similar to real-life scenarios. Nevertheless, there remained a lack of criminal accountability for such crimes. Currently, a stalker might only receive a verbal warning for their actions, and in cases of repeated violations, they could face fines, but not always. The enactment of Celeste's law, with its proposed changes, remains pending. Cedras commune, located in the department of Santa Maria near Cord City in Argentina, was home to Ana Rosa Berra, a 40-year-old woman with dreams of becoming a grandmother. Family friends described her as having a courageous character and adventurous spirit. When faced with starting over, she courageously moved forward. According to some reports, she lived in a tent for 4 years. However, the specific reasons for this remain unknown. Ana Rosa worked at the Secretariat for Children, Adolescents, and Families in Cordoba, a job she loved. She also co-ran an upholstery workshop with her partner Marcelo Fabio Ferretto. They met when she began sewing for his business. By 2017, Ana Rosa was 46 and Marcelo 51. They had been living together for a decade and practiced Reiki together. This complementary therapy involves applying palms to restore physical, mental, and spiritual balance. Nonetheless, the couple faced challenges and disagreements became prevalent. Both had 4 children from prior relationships. 2 of Ana Rosa's children resided in Salto province. The other 2 were abroad, one in France and another set to become a father in Bolivia. Her parents and siblings lived in Cordoba too. Ana Rosa had a positive relationship with her colleagues who frequently met both her and Marcelo. He worked as a wallpaper maker with his workshop near their home. Close acquaintances observed him as jealous and controlling, which increasingly irritated Ana Rosa. On Sunday, May 28th, the couple visited relatives in Villa Lens City. During their journey back, they argued intensely when Marcelo checked Ana Rosa's cell phone. The dispute continued at home into early Monday morning. Neighbors overheard them yelling and hurling insults at each other before things momentarily calmed down, only temporarily though. Hours later, Marcelo reported his wife as missing to the police. Despite various reports on when the man filed his report, most sources agreed he visited the 18th police station on Tuesday, May 30th. Marcelo informed the police and repeated to the media that he woke up at 6 a.m. that Monday morning, as usual, but his wife was already gone. He explained that Ana Rosa would typically rise early to feed the dogs before leaving home. Until then, everything seemed like a typical Monday, with Marcelo following his regular routine. The news of Ana Rosa's disappearance shocked Los Cerdos residents and the province. Her husband's statements indicated that the last time he saw her was Sunday night when they went to bed. Digital newspapers and TV stations reported Marcelo grew concerned upon receiving calls from Ana Rosa's colleagues puzzled by her absence from work. as she was not one to be absent without a valid reason. Marcelo recalled that on Monday, during a visit to a drugstore for some shopping, he stumbled upon Ana Rosa's white Chevrolet parked on Rainier Avenue in front of a beauty salon in Santa Isabel, strategically located between their home and her workplace. Her personal items and keys were in the car. Only her cell phone was missing. Marcelo claimed he had called her multiple times, and even friends and children left messages, all without response. The last WhatsApp message sent by Ana Rosa occurred at 10:40 p.m. on Sunday, May 28th. Individuals familiar with the case remained uncertain about what might have occurred or if she fell victim to a crime. Since submitting his report, Marcelo has stayed in constant contact with police while also leveraging social media and traditional media to aid in locating his wife. During an interview with reporters, Marcelo noted that Ana Rosa intended to go swimming at the gym early on the day she disappeared and had plans to meet with a trauma surgeon later. The most critical aspect for him is having her home safely. Regarding finding her car, Marcelo described exiting the pharmacy on Monday afternoon to see her vehicle outside a beauty and massage parlor. Considering Ana Rosa had complained of neck pain earlier, he decided to check if she was inside the salon. As he possessed a spare key for the car, he opened it and went through her belongings inside. He mentioned briefly suspecting she'd perhaps left due to an argument early Monday morning, but soon focused solely on finding her. The sequence of events as narrated by Marcelo paints a picture filled with anxiety and concern over his wife's sudden disappearance. According to his Reiki teacher, if she decided to leave, he should leave her alone. Prosecutor Leandro Altatonello of Altagracia took over the case. The investigation began immediately. Initially, several hypotheses were put forward. On the one hand, there was the possibility that Ana Rosa was the victim of kidnapping or robbery. They also considered the possibility of revenge. It wasn't excluded that she left voluntarily. As part of the investigation, Marcelo testified for more than 14 hours on Wednesday, May 31st. He gradually began to fall into a series of contradictions that, to the investigator, showed him less and less as the distraught husband of the missing woman, and more as the prime suspect in her disappearance. Everything Marcelo said made no sense to the detectives. Plus, his moods went through different stages, which alarmed experienced forensic investigators. At first, he seemed euphoric, confident, constantly giving interviews to the press. Then he began to extol his innocence, giving details nobody had asked about, and even tried to justify himself by talking about his relationship with Ana Rosa and her anger at him. Marcelo also began to say directly and without question that he couldn't have done anything wrong to his partner. The circumstances of Ana Rosa's car appearing at the scene where it was found, and Marcelo's explanation of its discovery, raised several doubts. According to witnesses living in that area where the car was found, it was left by a man in gray clothing, not a woman. As hours passed, despair grew among Ana Rosa's loved ones. Despite intensive search efforts, there were no results. While the search continued, investigative authorities pursued leads diligently. The prosecutor in charge felt convinced Marcelo was hiding something and insisted on a deeper investigation into this suspect. On Friday, June 2nd, during another meeting with police officers, Marcelo changed his attitude. He became calmer, yet when detectives presented him with cell phone antenna data showing movements that didn't match his story, the man broke down and revealed the truth came out. Marcelo admitted to the tragic killing of Ana Rosa, disclosing that he ran her down and then dismembered body to dispose of the remains. Following his confession, he also indicated where he had buried the dismembered of his partner of the last decade. A few hours later, police supported by a canine unit discovered Ana Rosa's remains. Excavations began around 2:30 p.m., concluding the search and uncovering her dismembered body in a hole Marcelo had dug himself. This area was situated on a dirt road, located in the countryside opposite a factory and roughly 200 meters away from Highway 5, which links the provincial capital with Altagracia. According to prosecutor Peralta Tonello, Marcelo was quite familiar with this location as he frequently visited it for work-related purposes. Everything Marcelo had previously stated turned out to be false, except for mentioning an early Monday morning quarrel. For Ana Rosa's family and friends, their worst fears materialized step by step. The prayers and hopes that she would return soon shifted into pleas for comfort and justice following this devastating revelation. The grief-stricken tears of uncertainty transformed into cries of irreparable loss and anger directed at the killer who had deceived everyone for days. Marcelo's acquaintances described him as jealous and manipulative, someone who kept Ana Rosa preoccupied with endless questions and demands. His controlling nature came to light during the investigation when it was found that he had hacked into Ana Rosa's social media account after managing to crack the password. The profile gathered on Marcelo revealed he knew all of Ana Rosa's passwords even prior to committing the crime. According to reconstructed events, they had been fighting throughout the weekend before she was reported missing. Marcelo's extreme jealousy ultimately led to this tragedy. Amidst one such heated argument, he struck her multiple times with a sledgehammer until she died. Attempting initially to place her lifeless body in his car but failing, he resorted to using a knife to dismember it. He then placed the remains in his vehicle and drove to the location where they were discovered days later. Pleading guilty, a new search was initiated on Friday at the residence shared by defendant and Ana Rosa. Various tools, including cleavers and knives of different sizes, were found during the search. Marcelo was arrested and spent his first night in jail. He charges of aggravated murder, femicide, and gender-based violence, all carrying life sentences. Prosecutor Peralta Atema clarified that Marcelo's admission could not be considered a full confession. Thus, the record noted he admitted to the crime while being interviewed as a witness. Further statements would be made once sufficient evidence was gathered. Documents essential to the case include the final autopsy report, forensic analysis of vehicles and items collected during searches, and outcomes of luminol tests at multiple locations. The defendant's attorney, Jose Luis Saca, stated that despite Marcelo's admission, he would seek his client's release. He argued that police statements held no legal authority, but could guide the prosecutor's procedural decisions without being definitive. Additionally, the defense attorney stated his client would not provide any testimony. Examinations continued over the weekend, and on Monday, June 5th, a preliminary autopsy report was published. This report indicated that Ana Rosa's cause of death was severe head trauma. The defendant's lawyer mentioned awaiting the lifting of secrecy to review evidence against Marcelo. He emphasized that psychiatric and psychological evaluations were crucial in understanding Marcelo's emotional state, possibly a significant aspect for the defense. On June 9th, it emerged that luminol tests conducted at their residence showed significant blood amounts had been washed into the patio area. The medical examiners discovered new insights after performing autopsies, noting cuts on the extremities inflicted by someone skilled with a knife. A significant wound, measuring 18 centimeters long and 7 centimeters deep, was found on the victim's neck, extending to the cervical region. Given these findings, the prosecutor's office charged Marcelo Fabio Ferreira with double aggravated murder due to his relationship with the victim and gender-based violence. After Ana Rosa went missing, her acquaintances shared information about her partner, and their relationship with both media and authorities. Viviana Lujan, a friend of Ana Rosa, mentioned that Ana started changing her style and stopped wearing lace-up shoes to work. She let down her hair and told Viviana that she felt prettier and more feminine. According to Viviana, these changes led to arguments with Marcelo. Other friends also noted that Ana Rosa had been in high spirits lately and seemed happy. She confided that she and Marcelo were experiencing difficulties, but were making efforts to improve their relationship. The couple even took several short trips together. Marcelo's trial for Ana Rosa's murder commenced nearly 2 years after the incident. The prosecutor's office presented the gravity of the charges to the jury meticulously. Final autopsy results revealed that Ana Rosa suffered a severe blunt force blow to the face, rendering her unconscious. Subsequently, multiple blows to the head resulted in a crushed skull. During the first hearing, Marcelo chose to remain silent while witness testimonies followed. Deborah Territorios, one of Ana Rosa's daughters and the first witness, testified that since her mother met Marcelo, she had grown distant from her children and other family members. Deborah explained they were initially compelled to move from Salta with their father, followed by her older siblings' relocation. This geographic separation worsened communication gaps with their mother. She noted that when alone with their mother, Ana Rosa was loving and attentive. However, whenever Marcelo appeared, her mother became distant. Deborah even mentioned hurriedly leaving her mother's house whenever she knew Marcelo was about to arrive. Ana Rosa's cousin, Roberto Enrique Reina, testified about the events that transpired on May 28, 2017, in his house where the altercation began. Roberto provided a detailed account of the quarrel. According to his testimony, the dispute originated from a message Marcelo discovered on Ana Rosa's cell phone. However, Roberto noted that Marcelo's jealousy appeared typical and not particularly unusual, which did not substantially benefit the prosecution. The prosecutor highlighted the accused's dominance over the victim, pointing out asymmetrical power dynamics and objectification of the woman in front of others. In terms of gender violence, the case file referred to evidence of obsessive jealousy from Marcelo. He enrolled in the same classes Ana Rosa attended, synchronized their schedules, and exerted complete control over her movements. The defense strategy focused on modifying the charges and scrutinizing actions leading to Marcelo's confession to the police that he committed the crime. It is important to note that at that time, Marcelo was testifying as a witness without legal representation present. If it can be established that law enforcement was already targeting him when he admitted to killing Ana Rosa, his confession might be deemed inadmissible, potentially invalidating other associated case files. Nevertheless, the prosecutor argued successfully that Marcelo's admission of guilt was evaluated against Supreme Court precedents and was accepted as evidence, despite lacking an attorney's presence during his statement. The second day of hearings saw continued testimonies. Notably, Fernanda Falimia, who was Ana Rosa's girlfriend, provided insights into Marcelo's behavior. According to her testimony, he had been controlling and increasingly violent shortly before Ana Rosa's tragic death. Fernanda, a colleague of the victim, testified that when Ana Rosa started her relationship with Marcelo, she became distant, but later tried to renew their friendship. Fernanda mentioned that Marcelo tried to follow his partner's every move. Notably, he even started taking Reiki classes after Ana Rosa began attending them. The indictment indicates that after starting energy harmonization therapy, Ana Rosa told her friend she felt good. She had mended her relationships with her mother, sister, and children, and intended to visit her son in Bolivia. Yet, as these positive changes began, Marcelo's behavior grew increasingly aggressive. Fernanda reported that Ana Rosa once remarked that women could achieve things with a great attitude. Marcelo angrily retorted that they were all fools who would end up dying in a ditch. Fernanda also noted the couple hadn't been living in the same room lately. Ana Rosa slept upstairs, Marcelo downstairs. On the hearing's second day, Claudio Bustamante, a police officer who took Marcelo's statement on May 2, 2017, gave his testimony as well. He assured the jury it was spontaneous. Marcelo had confessed without any pressure from him during the interrogation. Marcelo mentioned that on Monday, Ana Rosa informed him that he no longer satisfied her and admitted to infidelity. He confessed that this revelation made him angry, leading him to strike her, although he could not recall with what. Marcelo then recounted falling asleep at the table, waking up later to go to bed. He described the experience as dreamlike and surreal. He firmly believes that if he had been fully conscious, he wouldn't have committed such an act. With visible emotion, Marcelo apologized to the community, Ana Rosa's family, and his own relatives for the pain caused. On April 11th, the jury of the 11th Criminal Court found Marcelo Favio guilty of Ana Rosa Barrera's double aggravated murder. He received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 35 years. contingent on demonstrating good behavior. Upon hearing the verdict, the victim's family expressed their anguish and directed shouts and curses at Marcelo as he was swiftly escorted from the courtroom. The prosecutor remarked that the jury's decision aligned with the prosecution's request. Evidence demonstrated that Marcelo Favio acted with full awareness and had premeditated his actions against Ana Rosa. Prosecutors asserted that claiming a lack of full consciousness during the crime was a deliberate attempt to evade the maximum penalty. This is Michelle Hadley. She was born on December 20th, 1986 in Upland, California. Michelle was the eldest daughter of her parents, who were business owners. She grew up with a sister who's 3 years younger than her. Michelle was raised in a strict conservative home and shared a close relationship with her parents. Growing up, she had a pretty normal life. During her time at school and college, her friends knew her as a polite and kind person. Michelle was also known for being very outspoken and straightforward with what she had to say. However, she would always find ways to clear the air if there were any disagreements. Being a diligent girl since she was little, she always made sure to complete every task that was given to her. Throughout her high school days, she was in a relationship with just one person. Though we don't have information about his name or background, we do know that the two were together for a long time. In 2008, the two decided to get married. However, Michelle didn't realize that marriage would not bring her the happiness she sought. 4 years into their marriage, things started to fall apart. Things didn't feel like they did back when they started dating, and they decided to split up. This devastated Michelle. She believed that love just wasn't in the cards for her until 2013, when she met another man, Ian Diaz. Though we don't have much information about his past, we do know that he's 9 years older than Michelle. The two reportedly met through a dating site. Things with Ian felt like they were meant to be, at least from the show. Ian was working as a deputy U.S. Marshal, while on the show was working at a marketing firm. Ian seemed attentive to her needs and very loving. These characteristics drew Michelle in, and not long after, by the fall of 2014, they moved in together. Ian then proposed to Michelle, and they set a date for their wedding. Michelle and Ian seemed to hit it off very well during the start of their marriage. However, as sweet as the relationship looked from the outside, Ian slowly turned into something Michelle never foresaw. Michelle always saw Ian as an attentive and sweet-natured man. But as time passed, he soon became a self-loathing and abusive person. This took Michelle aback, since she had a hard time realizing these changes at first. She often noticed his changes in behavior, but considered them more of an act of love. There were times when he'd ask her to wear more revealing clothes. However, Michelle, being from a conservative family, found this request very uncomfortable. Nevertheless, she complied with Ian's requests. When Ian saw that Michelle could be easily persuaded, he started making more provocative requests. Soon, he asked her to get her belly button pierced. At first she hesitated, but later agreed. By this time, Ian was pushing the boundaries. His requests started to get even more bizarre. Ian had asked Michelle to leave the job at a marketing firm that she loved and take up a job at his favorite place, Disneyland. Disneyland was not only the place that he loved, but it had also been the place where he worked before he got his job as a deputy U.S. Marshal. It seemed as though Ian wanted to keep an eye on Michelle, so working at a place where he still had contacts was a good deal for him. When he presented the idea to her, he said that he wanted her to be in safer hands, but that only meant that he could watch over her every move. At first, Michelle found this request a little odd, but because she loved him and wanted to appease her husband, she obliged. By the time the request started to make Michelle feel troubled, it was too late. She saw herself becoming someone she wasn't, so she thought of talking it over with her husband. But instead of hearing her out, he lashed out and turned abusive. During this time of turmoil, Michelle and Ian decided to purchase a condo together. They naively thought that having a place that belonged to them would help make their relationship better. This was about 2 years after they met. In 2015, Michelle and Ian started searching for condo to buy and finally found one that was located in downtown Anaheim. This condo was priced at $470,000. Though it was a little beyond their means, they mortgaged it. But at that time, Michelle was unaware that Ian had no plans to pay even a single dime toward the mortgage. When it was time to put the pony up, he made up an excuse, saying he was having a hard time with finances, but he promised to pay for the next month. Michelle then decided to go ahead with the down payment, which was about $144,000 in cash. After sorting through all the paperwork, things seemed to be sorted. In hindsight, their relationship had already reached a dead end. So, with the purchase of the condo, things started to get worse. While both of their names were on the deed, it was evident that Ian wanted the condo for himself. Michelle wasn't having it though, since she was the only one paying the mortgage. At one point, when the two of them were together in the car, they got into a fight that turned violent. Ian raised his hand to Michelle, causing her to sustain slight injuries. After this, Michelle wrote an email to her sister telling her everything that was happening. Sadly, however, she never sent it. By the end of the summer of 2015, almost 2 months after purchasing the condo, Michelle decided to leave the condo to stay with her parents. However, even though she'd left Ian with the condo, she was still paying the mortgage. In fact, Ian continued to skip the mortgage payments, and this infuriated Michelle. At this time, she'd left her high-paying job and was still working at Disneyland, which she hated. She was also earning less than what she was used to. Instead of giving in to her anger, she politely asked Ian about the condo mortgage payments. However, instead of replying, he simply ignored her emails, calls, and texts. This pushed Michelle over the line. She decided to confront him directly. Ian then stated that he never intended on paying the mortgage. Michelle was furious about this. Looking at the situation she was in, she didn't know what to do. She sent Ian a rather strongly worded email saying that things wouldn't look good for him if he continued with the behavior. This email made Ian furious, and he filed a restraining order against Michelle. However, he never got full support from the police since he was also at fault. Michelle found out about Ian's restraining order request and quickly countered it with the fact that he never paid the mortgage on the condo since they bought it together, and it was in their name. Eventually, the two of them agreed to hire property lawyers and settled the issue for good. When the judgment was made, the judge sided with Michelle. Ian was ordered to pay the rest of the mortgage, and if he failed to do so, he'd have to pay an additional penalty. The judgment obviously upset Ian, but he had no choice but to follow the court order. It took a whole year for this mess to get sorted out. By 2016, the two had separated for good. Michelle was now finally free of this toxic relationship. While Michelle was turning over a new page in her life, Ian was still quite bitter. He was still living in the condo and paying the mortgage. The whole condo situation took a toll on Ian. In an effort to pick up the pieces of his life, he started using dating apps once again. This was how Ian met the woman he thought was his perfect match, Angela Connell. Though we don't have much information about her, we do know that she was born in 1985 and is from Phoenix, Arizona. Angela attended a Catholic high school and then graduated from Arizona State University in 2006. When Ian met Angela in January 2016, they both felt an instant spark. Within a month, Ian proposed, and soon Angela moved into Ian's condo. It seemed as if Angela and Ian were destined to be together. By May 2016, Angela announced that she was pregnant, with twins. Ian was overjoyed to hear the news. Everything seemed to be falling into place for the soon-to-be parents, until an anonymous email started creating havoc. Angela received a threatening email that said, "You're not the right person for Ian." This message took Angela aback, and she considered that it might have been from her ex. Before Angela married Ian, she briefly dated a man named Jason Rayburn. However, their relationship did not end well. Naturally, she thought of him as soon as she received this anonymous message. But there was one thing that didn't seem right. When Angela broke it off with Jason, she made sure it had cut off all contact with him. So it was impossible for him to know about her new relationship. It just wasn't adding up. Meanwhile, Ian and Angela continued to stay at the condo that was bought by Michelle. One day, Ian brought up the topic of the condo while he was talking to Angela, and then she finally realized that it might have been Michelle who sent that anonymous email. Soon, Angela began receiving more emails from 6 different accounts. All of them had the same message, but with different wording. Curious to find out who the sender of these emails might be, she replied to one of them and asked the identity of the sender. To her shock, she received a reply claiming the sender was Michelle Hadley. Angela told her to stop contacting her, but the emails didn't stop. The next few emails that she started to get made her feel threatened and worried for her life. After reading them, Angela didn't want to take a chance, but rushed to file a restraining order against Michelle. This happened on June 1st, 2016. In her statement, Angela mentioned that the emails she'd received from Michelle made her strongly feel fear and anxiety. She told the police officers that she was scared of leaving her home because of the threats that were in those emails that Michelle had sent. She also added that she was fearful of being attacked and killed if she stepped out of her home. After seeing the gravity of the situation, the Quicken immediately granted the restraining order against Michelle. It was during the month of June 2016, and Michelle seemed to have moved on from the toxicity of her previous relationship. Sometime during the month, she went out to meet a friend and was coming back home after, but when she only entered her driveway, she was met by a team of police officers. Michelle was dumbfounded, but without a struggle, she obliged with a restraining charge and was then taken in for questioning. During the interrogation, Michelle was asked if she knew Angela and also about the series of her email threats. To this, she replied that she had in fact never heard of Angela and was clueless about the emails that were continuously being mentioned by the officers. She even told the police officers that she was being set up because she'd received a Google alert a week before that her email address had been shut down. On the same day, she received an alert from Microsoft saying that her primary email is being used as the recovery email for a bunch of other email addresses that she'd never created. That troubled her, but she made it a point to contact the Anaheim Police Department to report the matter. She believed that it was her ex-husband who may have been trying to impersonate her, but despite her efforts, no one listened to her. On the other hand, the police officers thought that Michelle was just lying. They didn't take her words into consideration. So now, Michelle was served with a restraining order. But what Michelle did not know was that this was just the beginning. This is where things started to get even crazier. With Michelle charged with a restraining order, you might think that the situation had been settled, but it wasn't. Not long after, Angela started receiving emails in response to a Craigslist ad that she'd never posted. These ads had details soliciting a sexual coercion fantasy. Shocked by this, Angela knew that someone must have opened an account in her name. But the strange thing was, whoever it was, they had her exact details. These details included her phone number, full address of the condo, and even the breed of the dog she had. But no one else would know the entire address of the condo apart from Ian and Michelle. She thought that it couldn't have been Ian. Upon pondering this idea, Angela once again started to feel scared to death. She didn't even want to go out of her house because whoever it was knew where she lived. She felt like she was being continuously watched, and not knowing who could have done it made her feel uneasy. Days after the Craigslist ad, on the 24th of June 2016, Angela called the police. However, it was not because of the ad. This time, she was attacked. Her neck was bruised and the clothes she was wearing had been ripped. Her head had also been slammed against the wall. But still, Angela found the strength to call 911. The police then asked Angela if she recognized the person who assaulted her, and that was when Angela replied, it was Michelle. This time, the police made sure to arrest Michelle. They thought a restraining order wasn't enough to keep her from harming Angela. Michelle was arrested. While in jail, she managed to relay the message about her arrest to her parents. And since being from a conservative family, they did everything they could to handle the matter. Michelle's bail was set at $10,000, and since her parents were successful business owners, they managed to quickly bail her out. Once she was out, Angela started receiving harassing emails again. It couldn't have been Michelle, right? Well, the interesting part was, the emails that were sent to Angela actually did come from Michelle's personal email address. Not long after the tragic assault on Angela, on July 13th, she contacted 911 again. This time it was because she saw a man standing outside her condo. When the police arrived and talked to the unknown stranger, the person said he was actually responding to the same sexually explicit Craigslist ad in the name of Angela Diaz. Curious to know who might have posted the ad, the police searched for the origin of the account. It led straight to Michelle once again. Could Michelle have actually lied about all of this to the police, or was it someone else who was using Michelle's name? The next day, on the 14th of July, police arrested Michelle once again, and this time, they set her bail at $1 million. Her parents couldn't afford to pay such a large amount. Michelle vehemently denied sending the emails or creating the Craigslist ads. Her parents believed Michelle because they knew she wasn't the type to send threats to anyone. Michelle's parents then decided to hire a lawyer because they thought that whomever was playing this game could keep getting their daughter arrested. While Michelle was jailed for the second time, the threats and emails aimed at Angela again ceased. 3 months passed and everything seemed peaceful for Angela. Meanwhile, Michelle's parents were trying their best to find out who the anonymous person was posing as Michelle. To get to the bottom of it, they needed to know who had access to her records. They pulled data, school records, hospital records, and more to find if there were any loopholes. This was where they found crucial evidence. Michelle was hospitalized in June, and the first emails were sent on the same day of her hospitalization. Michelle couldn't have sent those emails herself. This piece of information gave hope to Michelle's parents. Michelle's father also downloaded a ton of software to track the IP addresses of the emails that were being sent, since they were encrypted addresses. Then one day, Michelle's parents received a surprising phone call that said Michelle was getting bailed. Who would bail Michelle out for $1 million? It turned out that the person who bailed out Michelle was none other than Ian. On the 30th of September 2016, Ian went to the police officers and presented a $1 million bail for Michelle's release. Michelle and her family were in disbelief. As to how Ian obtained this amount of cash, that has not been explained. Why would he bail her out? Did he suddenly have regrets for treating her badly? Or was there something more to the story? After Michelle was bailed out, obviously Michelle and her family wanted the answers to these questions. Surprisingly, Ian then revealed the truth. Ian claimed that Angela had supposedly framed Michelle for sending those threatening emails. She'd been sending threatening emails to herself via proxy email addresses that she made using Michelle's name. Angela even went further by posting Craigslist ads, which were believed to have been made by Michelle. In those ads, the details she entered could only have been known by Ian and herself. Additionally, on the 24th of June 2016, when she was found in her garage all bruised up, it was actually Angela who inflicted the injuries on herself. And Ian had found the CCTV footage to prove it. Ian revealed that this wasn't the only thing Angela had lied about. She had, in fact, a history of making things up. Ian found out that Angela had been lying since the first day they met. She'd even lied about her pregnancy. Ian found evidence that Angela had allegedly bought a sonogram of twins off of Etsy for $7.50. She even bought a positive pregnancy test kit to back up her lie. But why would Angela want to ruin Michelle's life? Well, it all started back in 2015 when Ian and Angela met. During that time, Ian would often talk about Michelle and the condo incident. This was when Angela got curious about Michelle and started digging up her past. While doing so, Angela found that Michelle actually came from a good and wealthy background. This piece of information made Angela think of Michelle as a jackpot. Ian, on the other hand, who was married to Michelle, wanted his revenge for the whole condo situation. You see, the condo incident left a scar on Ian. He was furious about having to pay for the mortgage after Michelle's countersuit. So, the two of them then hatched a plan to bring Michelle down. Ian provided Angela with Michelle's email address, and the two of them plotted to frame Michelle and get her arrested. To conceal their evil plan, Angela and Ian created different email addresses to talk to each other. They then made 6 different accounts using VPNs in Michelle's name. Remember when Michelle spoke to the police officers about Google alerts regarding the email addresses she never created? Well, it was Angela all along. When Michelle got a restraining order, Angela wasn't happy because she wanted Michelle gone for good. That was when she devised a plan to take this to a whole new level. She created a fake profile on Craigslist and used Michelle's identity to make her first ad, in which she invited men over to her own house for a sexual coercion fantasy. However, the inconsistencies in the scenario that the two planned out made Ian confess all about his wife, thus framing her in the process. He was apparently unaware of how far she would take things. Now that everything was out in the open, the police obtained a search warrant for all of Angela's devices. Shockingly, when they went through Angela's things, they found that all of Ian's claims were, in fact, true. They found a total of 21 threatening emails, and most of them were actually sent from Angela and Ian's condo. When the police dug up the locations of the other emails that were supposedly sent to Angela, they found that some of them were also sent from Arizona. When they dove deeper, they realized during that time, Angela had actually traveled to Arizona to see her father. After these shocking discoveries, investigators began to look into Angela's background. This was when they found out that this wasn't the first time she committed such an act. Back in 2013, Angela had committed similar crimes when she was dating Jason Rayburn, a state trooper from California. During their relationship, Angela claimed that she was an attorney and had been diagnosed with cervical cancer. However, as time passed, things didn't seem to add up with regards to Angela's diagnosis and her work. This made Jason suspicious, and he started digging deeper. Shockingly, he soon discovered that Angela had faked both her cancer and her career. Obviously, this ended things with Jason. On January 6, 2019, nearly 3 years after the truth was made public, Angela was detained for her crimes. The Orange County District Attorney's Office made sure to clear Michelle's name, and 3 days later, Michelle's record of causing a threat to life and assault was finally cleared. Michelle has slowly started to get back on her feet. She finally earned her MBA and landed a good job in field marketing for a cosmetics company. Michelle then moved to New York to live with her sister, and things had never been better. Ian, on the other hand, separated from Angela and later sold the condo for $500,000. But in 2021, Ian was charged with a number of offenses for allegedly planning and carrying out the crazy plot to frame Michelle. In addition to receiving a 5-year prison sentence, he was charged with 1 count each of perjury, cyberstalking, and conspiracy to commit cyberstalking. If only the investigators and police officers had looked into the whole situation a little more closely, maybe this wouldn't have gotten as far as it did. What do you think about this case? What could have possibly been going through Angela and Ian's minds when they hatched this plan? Where does the line lie that once crossed, there's no return? How does an ordinary woman transform from a loving wife and beloved mother into a cruel murderer, capable of dividing a nation into 2 opposing groups? And how does her name become a constant topic among locals and newspaper headlines for years? Roxana Valdez could answer this question. Murderers don't stand out in a crowd, are not recognizable during dinner, and might even live under the same roof without revealing their true nature. They are indistinguishable from those who never crossed that line. Thus, no one could have imagined what Roxana did on that spring evening of April 5th, 2014. And when they found out, they simply couldn't believe it. But let's start from the beginning. Little is known about Roxana's past. Despite the efforts of many Chilean reporters who competed to tell her story, they could find almost nothing about her. The only information from her criminal file was sparse. Born in a small village in the province of Punta Arenas, Chile, in 1957. That was it. Perhaps the lack of information was due to journalistic ethics, as the locals, known for their fiery temper and unique customs, might have retaliated against Roxana's relatives for her crime, potentially turning their lives into a living hell. Roxana Valdez was married to a man whose name, for reasons unknown, remains either undisclosed or unknown to the press. She had a son with him. It's clear that her marriage wasn't the dream every girl hopes for, as the couple eventually parted ways in 2011. As a single mother in a small village where jobs were scarce, Roxana faced significant challenges. In such communities, the primary occupation was growing and selling fruits and vegetables. Even the local educational institutions focused on agriculture. It was in this setting that Roxana found employment at the Don Gregorio boarding school, which trained students to become agricultural technicians. She worked as a night supervisor at the school, ensuring that students slept at night and did not engage in unruly activities. Her responsibilities didn't include the actual upbringing of the children. Roxana's son also attended this boarding school, as she worked in the fields during the day and couldn't give him the attention he needed. At the same boarding school where Roxana worked, Claudio Muñoz Ramirez held the position of head of grounds maintenance. His duties often required him to work during the night, which is how he came to meet Roxana. Despite being 14 years younger than her, they found much to talk about. Roxana would spend entire nights discussing school affairs and her own failed marriage with Claudio. They had common ground in their personal lives as well. Claudio had 2 daughters whom he adored, but felt disconnected from their mother, contemplating divorce several times. However, he remained in the marriage due to a promise he had made to her late father. Over time, Claudio seemingly forgot his promise and began spending his free time with Roxana, away from his family. Eventually, he made a decisive move. Without explaining himself to his wife, Claudio gathered his belongings and left their home. It was clear he went to Roxana, who happily welcomed him into her life. Their relationship progressed rapidly and effectively. Roxana let into her home a man she barely knew, with whom she had only enjoyed nighttime conversations. She seemed to overlook the fact that there were children around needing constant attention. Amidst these enjoyable and heartfelt talks, Roxana failed to notice Claudio's true nature. He was, in reality, quite temperamental, and sometimes even cruel. However, it was perhaps too early to judge who was more cruel between the two. The first serious outburst of aggression from Claudio took place within the walls of the boarding school. On a scheduled community cleanup day, students were assigned different areas to tidy up. Brooms, buckets, dustpans, and rags were distributed, everything needed for a thorough cleaning. As often happens, some students protested and refused to participate. Claudio, responsible for cleanliness but lacking any teaching experience, became infuriated with these students and threatened that, in the absence of teachers at night, he would beat anyone who didn't participate. Whether he would have followed through on this threat is unknown, but the students eventually started cleaning and later collectively complained to the principal about Claudio's threats of physical violence. The principal, displeased, asked Claudio to submit a voluntary resignation. It's important to note that the Don Gregorio boarding school was practically the only place in the area offering stable and reasonably paid employment. Claudio spent some time looking for work in fields and at fruit bases, but when it became clear his efforts were in vain, he and Roxana decided to seek a better life elsewhere, leaving her son in the boarding school to continue his education. They deemed it too risky to embark on this venture with him. To avoid dependency on employers, having been burned once already, the couple decided to start their own small business, a fruit kiosk. They moved to a favorable location, the commune of Molina, a couple of hours' drive from the Chilean capital. This place is well known for its vineyards, producing renowned wine brands exported worldwide. Roxana and Claudio purchased a kiosk near their new home, found suppliers for vegetables and fruits, and made their first steps in their small family business. Claudio handled the purchasing and transportation of the products from suppliers to the kiosk, while Roxana was in charge of sales throughout the day. Hiring an employee wasn't feasible, as it would mean additional expenses. Moreover, they feared that an employee might not monitor the perishable goods closely enough, leading to further losses. Claudio was visibly upset and even angry when he found out that Roxana was expecting their first child together. Perhaps it was a moment that required serious reflection, but Roxana, perhaps blinded by her new relationship and their flourishing business, didn't oppose her husband's view. She agreed that once the child was born, they would soon hand it over to her relatives for upbringing. However, it turned out there was no child to give away. Since that time, Claudio's behavior changed drastically. He often yelled at his wife and sometimes even resorted to physical violence. Neighbors from nearby houses, unhappy with their noisy new neighbors, witnessed this behavior many times and often called the Chilean police, the Carabineros, to intervene and calm the domestic disputes. On one occasion, when the Carabineros arrived in response to a call, they witnessed Roxana, in tears and almost half-naked, running out of the house, followed by Claudio. Roxana confessed to the officers that she was a victim of systematic domestic violence, which had led to a miscarriage. She even required psychological help after the incident. However, as time passed, the grievances were forgotten, and the troubled couple, as if nothing had happened, continued to live together as before. Following the incident, Claudio should have faced criminal charges, but a compassionate Roxana decided to give him another chance, extracting a promise that it was a one-time occurrence. Claudio vowed never to repeat such behavior, but his past actions with his ex-wife suggested his words might not hold much weight. Unfortunately, history repeated itself. Claudio temporarily ceased his physical abuse of Roxana but developed a habit of leaving home at night to drink heavily in local bars. He spent considerable amounts of their family budget not only on alcohol, but also on local women of ill repute. Roxana endured her husband's behavior, believing that Claudio would settle down once they had a child together. In a sense, she was right. In 2013, Roxana gave birth to a healthy child. Claudio stopped his carousing and fully immersed himself in their business, which now needed to expand. They purchased another kiosk in a neighboring area and another vehicle for product transportation. Roxana also invested in firearms for protection as they lived and worked in less safe areas. The family's wealth increased significantly, but only on paper. Claudio reverted to his old ways, squandering money on drinking and again resorting to domestic violence against Roxana. In Roxana's testimony, she recounted the escalating abuse in her relationship with Claudio. Initially, Claudio's drinking was infrequent, but it soon increased in frequency. He would come home inebriated, accusing Roxana of imagined infidelities, leading to physical and sexual abuse. Despite her pregnancy, Claudio's actions seemed deliberately harmful, culminating in a miscarriage in August 2012 that plunged Roxana into a lengthy depression. One night, following his usual pattern, Claudio went out to a local bar and did not return home until the next morning. Roxana, used to his behavior, still worried about him. It turned out that Claudio had stolen 5 million Chilean pesos, about $6,000, which Roxana had from selling her mother's house, to spend on alcohol and brothels. This betrayal shocked Roxana, as the money was for their shared business and was hidden in their daughter's room. When Claudio finally returned home late that evening, Roxana confronted him about the missing money. Uninterested in discussing, Claudio hit her and admitted to squandering all the money. This was the last straw for Roxana. Without a word, she went to their bedroom, retrieved a revolver intended for protection against local criminals, and shot Claudio in the chest. He died instantly, surprised by her drastic action. Roxana, equally shocked by her own actions, attempted to stem the bleeding from the fatal gunshot wound, but it was too late. The close-range shot from a .38 caliber bullet was fatal. Roxana's desperate act marked a tragic culmination of ongoing domestic turmoil. Roxana's testimony reveals her profound remorse and recognition of the immorality of her actions. She confesses that when she went for the revolver, her intention was not to intimidate Claudio but to kill him. She recalls the countless times Claudio abused and assaulted her, and her failure to report him to the authorities or retract her complaint out of fear. She feared being alone even before they had a child together. After shooting Claudio, Roxana's immediate concern was the potential impact on their daughter, especially if Roxana were imprisoned and the child sent to an institution. That night, Roxana decided that the best way to deal with the situation was to dispose of the body and report Claudio missing, aware that his frequent disappearances during drinking binges were known to the police. Disposing of the body was a daunting task for Roxana, a delicate woman. She decided to remove it piece by piece. First, she used kitchen knives intended for meat cutting to sever the limbs and head. This process required 5 knives, as they kept dulling. Then she boiled the dismembered parts in the largest pots she had, all while playing with her young daughter, who was oblivious to her mother's actions and her father's fate. Roxana's calculated approach to disposing of the body, while maintaining a semblance of normalcy for her daughter, highlights the complexity and desperation of her situation. The day after cooking and cooling the body parts, Roxana packed them into plastic containers, organizing them separately: hands, legs, head, and torso. Each container was then placed in a garbage bag. She loaded them into her car and headed to St. Lucia to scatter the bags on a vacant lot. Before leaving, she thoroughly cleaned her house with bleach. However, once in St. Lucia, she couldn't muster the courage to dispose of the bags from her car, despite finding a suitable spot. In her testimony, Roxana expressed her internal conflict. "It's strange. I had the bravery to commit this heinous crime and dismember a human body as if it were a piglet, but I couldn't bring myself to dispose of the evidence. I was nervous throughout the drive, feeling constantly watched, fearing that police would stop and search my car at any turn. This fear led to panic, even though I had a backup plan involving my daughter, pretending to rush her to the hospital if stopped. I even thought of how to pinch her to make her cry louder." Unable to discard the remains, Roxana returned home with them, hiding the bags in the garage. She cleaned her car's interior with bleach again and visited Claudio's relatives, claiming that he had stolen a large sum of money and hadn't been home for days. They merely shrugged in response. She then visited her mother and brother. Her mother was extremely worried about Roxana's behavior. She was not eating, had a glassy-eyed look, and repeatedly asked the same questions. The only question she answered promptly was about Claudio's absence, saying he went to buy goods for their store, but had a flat tire and got delayed. Returning home and alone with her thoughts and the hidden evidence, Roxana broke down. She called her brother for help. When he arrived, she confessed everything and showed him the containers. Naturally, her brother was in shock. When Roxana called her brother, she wanted to vent and share the nightmarish years she endured with Claudio, but above all, she needed his help to get rid of the containers holding the body. However, her brother refused, fearing police involvement and the possibility of being charged as an accomplice. He urged her to confess to the Carabineros, Chilean police, insisting he would do it if she didn't. Disappointed but realizing she had no other choice, Roxana complied. That night, Roxana went to the 4th police station and announced her intention to make an important statement. The officers, familiar with her, initially thought she wanted to report her troublesome husband. However, they were shocked by her confession. Roxana was immediately arrested. The news spread rapidly throughout the area, attracting countless journalists around the station. They waited eagerly to photograph Roxana as she was let out, hoping to capture a few images and, if lucky, ask her and the officers some questions. As the journalists waited, Roxana was eventually brought out. Handcuffed and in distress, she exclaimed, "I was afraid he would kill me one day," before being escorted into a police car. The case seemed straightforward. Roxana had confessed, provided evidence, and voluntarily surrendered. However, prosecutor Monica Ballesteros wanted a deeper investigation. Skeptical of Roxana's easy confession, she requested an extended arrest to conduct a forensic examination. Ballesteros aimed to prove that Claudio was still alive during the dismemberment, which would significantly increase Roxana's sentence. The judge granted a 60-day detention for further investigation. Meanwhile, Roxana's attorney, Carolina Gutierrez, argued that Roxana acted under extreme emotional distress, possibly exacerbated by postpartum depression and chronic domestic abuse. She emphasized Roxana's cooperation and voluntary confession as mitigating factors. However, the prosecution's theory that Claudio was alive during dismemberment crumbled after forensic results. It was confirmed that Claudio died from the gunshot wound to the chest. The bullet from the .38 caliber revolver caused a heart rupture and damaged vital organs, disproving the prosecution's initial hypothesis. Given these developments, the aggravating circumstances were dismissed. Another lawyer, Juan Pablo Cardenas, who sought to make a name for himself in this high-profile case, pointed out that the firearm used in the murder was legally registered. He also noted that Roxana's first report of domestic violence to the police was filed just 20 days after the couple started living together. Psychologist Rodrigo Valenzuela, after a medical examination, submitted documents to the court indicating that Roxana was extremely mentally unstable at the time of the crime. This meant she wasn't fully aware of her actions, and her emotional instability was linked to the loss of two children, one in August 2012 and another just 3 weeks before the crime. Furthermore, a forensic examination requested by the prosecutor revealed that Claudio had a high blood alcohol level of 3 grams per liter at the time of his death. On April 17, 2015, after a year of various examinations, investigations, and evidence gathering, Roxana's trial began. The media, often sensationalizing tragedies, dubbed the case the Molina Cooks case, alluding to Roxana's dismemberment and boiling of her former husband. Some unscrupulous journalists seeking to attract attention to their publications even fabricated stories that Roxana had eaten part of the remains, although this was merely a product of their imagination. Roxana, aware of the media portrayal and deeply distressed by it, refused to make any statements during the trial. The prosecutors tried to influence the judge by emphasizing that Roxana committed a grave crime by Chilean standards, patricide. However, they couldn't prove that the murder was premeditated. The defense attorney, in turn, argued that his client acted in self-defense, protecting herself from a brute who had brutally mistreated her for years. The court hearing lasted several weeks, and during this time, the entire population of Chile followed the case closely. Prosecutor Monica requested a 15-year prison sentence for the accused. However, the judges, having carefully listened to the defense and the jury's opinion, sentenced Roxana to 6 years in a correctional facility with a lenient regime. Claudio's relatives, who understandably wished for a life sentence or even execution for Roxana, and were already protesting when they heard the prosecutor asking for only 15 years, were utterly dismayed by the actual court decision. They tried to deny any violence in the family and argued that Claudio, being a businessman and financially independent, could not have stolen $6,000 from Roxana. They also claimed that Claudio had confessed to them that Roxana often took out the revolver from the closet and told her husband that she would kill him one day. Claudio's sister, in an interview with the press, even tried to blame Chile as a state, arguing that it's a country where there is no justice, and the judicial system is utterly corrupt, given that such brutal criminals are given such short sentences, comparable to minor robberies. Even Giselle, Claudio's first wife, defended her ex-husband, assuring everyone that there couldn't have been any violence from Claudio's side. She had lived with him for many years, and during all that time, he never dared to lay a finger on her. Meanwhile, Roxana often caused disputes, motivated by her jealousy and possessiveness. Regarding Roxana's subsequent imprisonment, she spent only 2/3 of her sentence in the colony before being transferred to a semi-open education center in Talca for good behavior. Roxana was allowed to communicate with her daughter and was eventually released early. The press, of course, stirred up public interest in this case again, and the public was extremely outraged that the cook from Molina was released early. However, there were also those who, although considering Roxana a murderer, still justified her actions, seeing her as a victim in the whole situation. The debate over this case continues in the country to this day. Overall, this story highlights the grave consequences that can result if domestic violence is not addressed at early stages. Corpus Christi resident Kevin Davis strangled his mother before hitting her in the head with a hammer, splitting her skull. Davis then swirled her brain around before sexually assaulting her corpse. Davis was sentenced to life in prison for the crime of a mom who he described as the best. In 2014, Kevin Jazrell Davis argued with his mother, 50-year-old Kimberly Hill, in the Corpus Christi, TX, apartment he shared with her and his sister, Destiny. On May 26th, Davis called 911, reporting that he'd just murdered his mother. Once at the police station, then 18-year-old Davis vividly detailed the day's events, sometimes with a smirk on his face. What he told detectives was gruesome and shocking. Kevin admitted bashing in Hill's head with a hammer, swirling her brain around, and then sexually assaulting her corpse. On the morning of March 27, 2014, Davis, bored and frustrated with life, told his mother he did not like people and that he wanted to commit suicide. Obviously caught off guard by the statement, Hill allegedly told her son that she could not stop him, that was what he wanted to do. Kevin later told police hearing this from his mother enraged him. It was then he decided to take her life. As Hill sat on the couch in the living room, Davis came up behind her, attempting to strangle her with a cord. Hill began screaming. Kevin panicked, retrieved a hammer, and began bashing in his mother's skull. Davis struck his mother in the head with the hammer at least 20 times, splitting her skull in the process. Davis then retrieved a kitchen knife that he inserted inside his mother's head wound. He swirled her brain around to make sure she was dead, Kevin claimed, and then inserted his hand inside the wound. He would tell detectives during a taped interrogation that his mother's brain felt like putty. Kevin then dragged his mother's lifeless body to her bedroom and raped her corpse. When he finished the sadistic act, he went to a neighbor's house, saying he just killed someone and needed help. The neighbor dialed 911. Police arrested Davis without incident. At the police station, he made a full confession of the crime, giving details that even seasoned detectives found highly disturbing. Watch part of Kevin Davis's confession. During the interrogation, Davis told detectives that he originally planned on killing his sister, too, but changed his mind. He further admitted that he often fantasized about having sex with dead bodies. With a smirk on his face, Kevin also told the detective that he was a virgin before he raped his mother. He stated, "I guess I've lost my virginity to a corpse," as he gently laughed. What did Kimberly Hill do to warrant such a violent death? Nothing warrants a son murdering and sexually assaulting his mother, of course, and Kevin could not give detectives one good reason for the crime. According to Kevin, she was a great mom that did not deserve what he had done to her. He said that she was the best mother in the world, and went on to say, "I am a terrible, disgusting person." Kevin admitted that he had the best mother in the world, telling detectives that she did nothing to deserve what was done to her. He went on to say that he was a terrible, disgusting person. In reality, Kevin was a serial killer in the making, a psychopath who took sadistic pleasure in hurting other people. Although diagnosed by a psychologist with antisocial personality disorder, the doctor said he knew right from wrong when he brutally murdered and raped his mother. He readily admitted that he would kill again if ever released from prison. He also confessed to then fleeing the crime scene on his bicycle. Before he did that, though, he left several handwritten notes for the police, one of which read, "Chase me. Sorry for the mess. KD." But after a while, he decided against leaving town and called 911 to report his mother's killing and his crimes. Despite admitting to the murder and making a videotape confession, Kevin Davis pleaded not guilty to the charges in court. He later changed the plea. Davis smiled at the jury as they sentenced him to life in prison. He serves his time at the Jester 4 facility in Richmond, Texas, and is eligible for parole in March 2044. Story number 2. Story of the Killer Priest. We will be exploring the story of a killer. A priest that seemed to be normal, nothing strange or nothing weird about him, however he did have a dark side. It turns out that not only was he a pervert, but he was manipulating people as he saw fit, especially women. And now without further ado, let's dive into the story of Guy Gabriel. We're going back in time in the 50s in France, and we need to take note that the church at that time had a very important place in people's lives, especially in the countryside. The priests were almost as important as the mayors because they were representing a type of moral authority that many people listened to, and this was the case in the small village of Europe where this story took place. A town that had about 400 villagers. Guy Gabriel was born on the countryside, and his family was very Catholic. They raised him so that he can have a career in religion as a priest, and even if that was not his first choice, that is exactly what he became. It is in 1950 that Guy became a priest at the Church of Europe. In appearance, this young man looked like the ideal priest. He was nice, friendly, kind, and very dynamic. Anything linked to religion, he did it very, very well. He had a lot of great ideas to help the village grow. He created a choir, a group to play in a theater piece. He gave organized multiple excursions for the kids, and he was known to have created a soccer team for the boys of the village. The older people thought that it was very modern for him to bring all these items to the village, and the younger generation thought it was pretty amazing and appreciated the modern aspect that he brought to the town and to the religion. Desnoyers was apparently also a beautiful man, and the ladies found him very charming. Now, as I have mentioned at the beginning, underneath this whole angelic disguise, God was actually hiding a dark secret, his personality. He had a thirst for carnal pleasure, and he was using his charm to get closer to the ladies. After a lot of perversity and manipulation, a lot of the women actually gave in, and none of the women spoke as they were afraid that no one would believe them and did not want to be seen as the shame of the village. It is in 1953 that things took a different turn for Guy Desnoyers. An incident happened that changed the plan of the priest. A 16-year-old girl fell for his charm, and guess what happened? She became pregnant. Now, of course, the priest denies everything, and he says that he is not the father. He threatens the girl and says that if she does not stop, he will file a complaint for defamation. Now, having a high influence in the village, Guy says that this is nonsense and it is impossible for him to be the father, and of course, having such an high influence, his followers believed him. He was even summoned in front of his superior, the bishop, to which he lied to you and denied the whole thing, and of course, this whole situation was shut down. In reality, he was actually the father, and he actually took the girl to another village to give birth, where he convinced her to give away the child, and of course that story was never heard of or told to the villagers, or we could say, maybe presume, that if people knew, they decided not to say anything because the priest had such a high influence on the villagers that they did not want to go against him. Once the story died, Guy went back to his normal ways and kept manipulating the people like he did before, but there was another incident in 1956. Regine Faze, 19 years of age, got pregnant, and again by Guy Desnoyers. Contrary to the other women, Regine did not want to give away her child for adoption. Not only that, but she wanted to raise him in the village of the Europe where the priest was. Guy was terrified, and he was afraid that eventually the child would grow up and resemble him. He was also afraid that this woman would actually speak eventually. Speaking of which, in 1956 rumors started to make surface. A lot of parishioners were becoming pregnant in mysterious ways, and no one knew who the father was. The priest then starts to think about a plan and ask a military man from another village to come to town and pretend that he was the father. Unfortunately, that strategy did not work out, and no one believed the soldier was the father. That only made things worse for the mysterious pregnancies. December 3rd, 1956 is a date that changed everything for the priest. Guy brings Regine in on a deserted road to try and convince her one more time to give up the child. She refuses again, and she was tired of the priest's requests, so you know what she did? She got out of the car and started to walk back the opposite way back to the village. At night, Guy Desnoyers got out of the car and pulled out a 6.35 caliber pistol and fired 3 shots. The 3 shot hit Regine in the back of the neck, then she died on the spot. Once the crime committed, the priest walked to the victim, undressed her, and took out a knife and started to open Regine's stomach. From her stomach, he removed the baby girl that was still alive. The priest committed again an act that cannot be forgiven. He strangled the baby, stabbed it, disfigured it, and he did all the thinking to himself that, if the baby is massacred that way, there would be no way, no DNA, if you want to call it that way, no DNA to trace the baby back to him. The disappearance of Regine was actually reported in the evening, and the weird part is that the priest joined the search party to find Regine. Can you imagine that situation? I mean, the killer is with you in the search party trying to find the person that he just murdered. Is it just me, or that is just like twisted? The body was found very quickly, and because the priest was not an assassin, he didn't, think about cleaning up the crime scene, so it didn't take long for the cops to find the murder weapon, and they found the weapon casing that linked back to the priest. So the priest is now a suspect, and when asked during the interrogation, the priest denied everything. However, because of all the pressure he was getting, he just cracked and admitted everything. Now that story came out and everyone was devastated in France because he is now a criminal, and the church asked for Guy to be locked up with a false name so that it would not affect the church, and also the main reason was to make sure that the crime was not associated to the church. The court addressed the case of Guy Desnoyers on January 24, 1958. Of course, the villagers and the public opinion wanted the priest to be sentenced to death. The life of Guy was defined as a person that did enjoy luxury, sexual relations, and admired his own authority, and on his side, the priest was asking forgiveness because he had no clue what he did wrong. The jury did provide their verdict, and for most, they said that he was guilty of double murder. Of course, there was Regine and the baby. However, they did not want to sentence him to death. The jury did not want to send someone associated to the church to the scaffold. The priest Guy Desnoyers was therefore sentenced to perpetrated work. Now that situation raised a lot of questions regarding the responsibility of the Catholic Church, and this is still a question that is being asked nowadays, especially for the priests who like other kids, if you know what I mean. There was an investigation that was done, and the report came out saying that the church knew the dark side that he was hiding before he was pronounced priest. His superiors noticed that he did not have a lot of faith, and he was not really a believer in Catholic religion. The investigation did show that before being priest in Europe, he was sent to Blemont. While he was there, he did have a sexual relation with his parishioner, and instead of removing his status, they just transferred him to another city. Even there, his weakness for women did not stop, as he did have multiple sexual relations. You would think that the church would revoke his status, but instead he was just transferred to Europe where the church was isolated and his temptations might be lower. But as we have seen, this was not the case. Desnoyers was released in 1972 after being detained for 22 years. He was the oldest prisoner of France. Once again, the church came to his help after he was released from prison. He was welcome in a monastery in Brittany, where he stayed there until he died on April 21, 2010 at 90 years of age. Now we go to story number 3. Family slaughtered at Wellsgrave Provincial Park. The killer stalked the family while he let his violent fantasies run wild. 3 generations of a family left to go camping on August 2, 1982. They set up camp in the Wellsgrave Provincial Park, located roughly 120 kilometers north of Kamloops in central British Columbia. They enjoyed several days of quality family time, picking berries during the day and gathering around the fire at night, having no idea that they were being stalked by a killer. Among the campers was grandparents Edith, 59, and George Bentley, aged 66. Their daughter Jackie, 41, and son-in-law Bob Johnson, 44. Also the Johnsons' daughters Janet, 13, and Karen, just 11. The Johnsons drove up with their daughters and pitched a tent for the girls. The grandparents brought a truck and camper where the adults would stay. The last anyone heard from the family was on August 6th, when Edith called another daughter. It would not be until August 23rd that the family would first be reported missing. Bob Johnson was due back at work on August 16th, but didn't show. After a week with no word from him, his company filed a missing persons case with the police. In spite of an extensive search, it didn't result in finding any of the family members. The biggest problems were the killer had a head start. With plenty of time to kill, get rid of the victims' bodies, and cover his tracks. The other, maybe even bigger obstacle was, no one knew exactly where the family was camping at. All anyone knew was that the family was camping in the Wellsgrave area, which is massive. They had no idea where to even start, let alone being able to follow a trail to find the family. It would take 3 more weeks and a mushroom picker to find the family. On September 13th, the current discovery of the Johnsons' 1979 Plymouth was found. It had been burned beyond recognition as it set off to the side of a mountainside logging road. The car held the bodies of the 4 adults in the back seat and the 2 young girls in the trunk. The bodies were burned so thoroughly that when it came time to bury the family, they were all placed together in one child-sized casket. Through a forensic examination of the remains, it was determined they had been shot with a .22 caliber firearm. Locals were able to tell investigators where they had seen the family camped at. An examination of the area would turn up .22 casings, which helped identify the weapon used as a Remington pump-action rifle. What wasn't at the campsite was the truck and camper, the boat, and camping gear brought with the family, or any trace of the family at all. With no suspect in custody or even in sight, the media was pushing for answers. A tip came in that the family's truck and camper had been spotted. The witnesses said it was being driven by two French Canadians in Central Canada. The media sprang into action, throwing this up as their headline and demanding the killers to be caught. In April, with still no leads, the investigators knew they needed to get creative. They reenacted what they believed was the crime scene for TV cameras and aired it across Canada. The next month, the police drove a replica Ford camper truck to Ontario and Quebec in an attempt to draw awareness for what people should be looking out for. What it did instead was flood the investigators with over 13,000 tips and sightings of the replica vehicle. The reward was raised from $7,500 to $10,000 for information leading to the truck. None of the tips led to the discovery of the camper and truck. It would be found by sheer luck. Two forestry employees were working on a logging road and stumbled across it. The camper had sat there on Trophy Mountain for 14 months, only a few kilometers away from the crime scene. The camper was burned out like the car holding the family's bodies. This left the authorities to believe they were looking for someone local to the Wells Gray area, and not two French Canadians as they had been searching for, since it was more likely that a local would know about the logging roads and the area in general. Taking a closer look at the person who lived closest to the crime scene led them back to David William Shearing, 24. They had received a tip about him earlier in the investigation. When they followed up, the tipster had quite a bit to tell them. I hear earlier Shearing had asked him about re-registering a Ford truck and how to repair a hole in its door. This was a tip that the police had never divulged. After finding the truck, it had a bullet hole in the door. After an interrogation by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Shearing confessed. He went so far as reenacting the murders for the detectives. He turned over evidence that he had stolen from the family and the murder weapon, the .22 caliber Remington rifle. The ballistic test would prove that this was the weapon used to kill the family. The same weapon that had been hanging at his wall the very first time the authorities went to ask him about the family, right after they had been reported missing. Maybe it was because his father was a prison guard or his brother was a sheriff. But Shearing wasn't suspected when first interviewed. In his confession, he gave details of how it all happened. He had first noticed the family when he set up camp, fixating on the two young girls. Then over the next few days, he watched their every move. On the night of August 10th, Shearing watched as the adults sat around the campfire and had seen the girls go into their tent for the night. From a distance, he took out the four adults with sniper shots. He said he then killed the two girls from their tent as they slept. After, he said he loaded all the bodies into the car and moved it to the logging road, then set it on fire with 5 gallons of gasoline. He then cleaned up the campground, removing the family's possessions, including the camper and truck. It would only be later that he'd burned these as he was unable to transfer them into his name. He claimed that he killed the family because he wanted to rob him of their possessions. It wouldn't be until after Shearing was convicted that he gave his full confession of how he had been stalking the family. It was the girls that he fantasized about having sex with that kept him interested. That's why after telling the adults, he kidnapped the girls and took them to his property nearby. There he raped and terrorized them for over a week. On August 16th, the day their father was due back at work, Shearing took Taryn away from her big sister. Once alone, he shot the girl in the back of the head. Janet would be left alive for one more day of torture before she would be killed like her sister. With the girls now dead, he took their bodies to the Johnsons' car where the other family members had been placed. He had actually only hidden the car in some bush. He put the girls in the trunk and got into the driver's seat with the 4 decomposing adult bodies in the back seat. driving it to its final resting place where it would be found by that mushroom picker burned out. David Shearing pled guilty to 6 counts of murder. Shearing was sentenced to life in prison with no eligibility for parole for 25 years. The maximum penalty for second-degree murder. This would be the first time that this sentence was handed out in Canadian history. David Shearing, who changed his last name to his mother's maiden name of Ennis, was first eligible for parole in 2008. The National Parole Board ruled against his release, citing that he was still having violent sexual fantasies and had not completed a sex offender treatment program, so he was not ready to be released. Again in 2012, he was turned down for parole, applying again in 2014, but before his hearing, he withdrew his request. The National Parole Board has also been given a petition which has over 15,000 signatures, advocating for the violent offender to never be released. In his own words at one of his parole hearings, David tries to plead for freedom, saying this about himself: "I was very selfish." He is supported by his wife, that he married while in prison, Heather. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Matthew Patrick Podolak. Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak was born on June 10, 1975 in Ohio, USA to Patricia Romano and Leonard Podolak. During his high school years, Matthew was a member of the school hockey team. After graduating, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Following his naval service, Matthew secured a job at Phoenix Industrial Finishing, a company owned by his uncle. However, he struggled to get along with his colleagues. According to his sister Chrissy Duca, some co-workers disliked him, possibly due to jealousy over his expected promotion and his uncle's plans to groom him to take over the business. Matthew enjoyed pursuing outdoor activities, such as boating, camping, and hunting. In his free time, he also played softball and hockey. Matthew met Holly McFeature in 2003, and they began dating shortly after. They eventually moved in together in a home in Cleveland. Their friends described Matthew as a man overjoyed to have found someone to settle down with and start a family. Within a year, they had their first child, a daughter named Samantha, and about 2 years later, they had a son named Josh. The family also included a third child from Holly's previous relationship. Matthew's mother, Patricia, described how her son fell deeply in love, giving himself 110% to the relationship. He was truly devoted to Holly. However, by 2005, their romance had deteriorated, becoming argumentative, strained, and divisive. Whenever Matthew and Holly quarreled, he would leave home and spend the night at a friend's place. This wasn't an isolated incident, and his friends repeatedly urged him to break off the relationship, warning him about Holly's selfish behavior. Despite their concerns, Matthew refused to listen and always went back to her. Matthew held a life insurance policy that named Holly McFeature as the beneficiary. Despite friends warning Matthew to remove Holly from the list of beneficiaries, he refused to do so. Russell, Matthew's closest friend, portrayed Matthew's emotional state as fluctuating wildly, veering from extreme happiness to intense anger, upset, tears, and occasional fear. Russell also testified that he was aware Matthew had sunk into depression during that period. According to Russell, Matthew was overly ecstatic about his future life and was particularly enthusiastic about raising all 3 kids. However, given the unstable situation, Russell cautioned Matthew that he needed to take precautions to safeguard himself and remove any firearms from the house. In 2006, after the hockey season came to an end, Matthew turned to online gambling, which led to significant financial losses. His family and friends soon became aware that he was struggling with his mental health, as he was clearly unwell and depressed. At the urging of his loved ones, Matthew sought medical attention from a doctor, who subsequently prescribed him antidepressant medication. By Memorial Day weekend, Russell Harry had become very worried about Matthew's physical health. After enlisting Matthew's help to move a motor from one boat to another, Russell noticed some alarming changes. Matthew, once very strong, had now gained weight and was sweating excessively. He was also complaining of back pain and felt he had lost his strength. Russell urged Matthew to see a doctor and even recommended a specific physician, Dr. Thomas Mandat. Matthew saw Dr. Mandat on July 26, 2006. During this visit, Russell overheard Holly yelling at Matthew in the background, telling him he was too stupid to know which doctor he was supposed to see. At the appointment, Matthew complained about back pain. After examining him, Dr. Mandat diagnosed Matthew with kidney stones and prescribed medication to help pass the stones and alleviate the associated pain. On July 30th, Matthew phoned his father to share the news that he had purchased a fishing rod for his daughter and was eager to take her and his father on a fishing trip in the near future. His father reported that Matthew sounded enthusiastic and was looking forward to their outing. Later that same evening, Matthew attended a party hosted by Russell, who would later testify that Matthew's physical appearance was alarming. He had put on even more weight, was sweating excessively, and struggled to walk without support. Additionally, Matthew complained of severe back pain. Later that evening, Holly reached out to Matthew's father to inform him that she had called 911 because Matthew was in distress. The father had a brief conversation with his son over the phone and found him to be confused and extremely upset. Following the ambulance's arrival, Matthew was rushed to Parma General Hospital due to suspected organ failure. It was eventually discovered that Matthew's kidneys had failed, and the doctors diagnosed him with metabolic acidosis, a condition where his blood had become excessively acidic. Dr. Mandad, a member of the emergency medical team, suspected that Matthew might have ingested a toxic substance, such as methanol or antifreeze. He and the team questioned Holly, who was present, about the possibility of Matthew having swallowed antifreeze or medical alcohol. However, she denied that Matthew had taken anything. On July 31, 2006, Matthew Podek passed away in the hospital due to kidney failure. According to Dr. Mandad's testimony, metabolic acidosis is typically caused by respiratory problems. However, that was not the cause in this case. Dr. Mandad clarified that ethylene glycol is another possible cause of metabolic acidosis, which is what happened here. Matthew's death was devastating to his family and friends, but Holly seemed unaffected. Rebecca Vega, Holly's friend, testified that she had reached out to Holly to offer support in the days that followed Matthew's death. Vega accompanied Holly to the funeral home to help make arrangements, and was struck by Holly's complete lack of emotional response, neither sadness nor shock. Matthew's father stated that during the wake, he had to request Holly McFeature to enter the room where the casket was located so that she could receive visitors. However, she appeared to be emotionally numb, as if she felt nothing. Similarly, Russell Harry described Holly's behavior as if she was attending a celebration, completely unaffected by the recent events. A remarkable detail surfaced shortly after. The day following Matthew's death, August 1st, Holly used an ATM to withdraw cash using Matthew's bank card. Furthermore, she wrote checks in his name, effectively draining his bank account. Holly was subsequently arrested and charged with 2 counts of forgery after Matthew's mother notified the authorities about the suspicious activity. In the end, Holly agreed to pay restitution and received a 1-year probation sentence. Her family claimed she had only been trying to obtain money to support the couple's children in Matthew's absence. Holly McFay was listed as a beneficiary on Matthew's life insurance policy, but the payout was relatively small, totaling just $10,000, which she received 2 weeks after his death. During a visit to Holly's home, her friend Rebecca Vega noticed cleaning solvents left out in the open in the kitchen, which she found concerning given the presence of young children. When Vega inquired about the substances, Holly explained that one of the items was antifreeze, which Matthew had used to winterize his boat. Matthew's best friend, Russell, testified that Matthew hadn't owned a working boat since 2004 or 2005, when the engine failed. Michael Jama, A Cleveland police officer who had known Holly McPhee since 2002 would often visit her house for coffee and conversation. He'd typically call ahead to avoid interrupting another man's visit. One day, he called to check if he was catching her at a bad time, and she told him not to worry about it anymore, explaining that Matthew had passed away the previous week. The officer was struck by her casual tone, which seemed careless and heartless to him. After Matthew's death, Holly had his computer handed over to a friend who then removed certain content from the hard drive. She also cut up his clothes to make a quilt, which meant that his father and brother were left with no clothing items to remember him by. 6 weeks later, Holly started dating Charles Lipham, a police officer from Cleveland. At first, she told him that her ex-boyfriend had died from kidney failure. However, she later changed her story after the autopsy results were released in January 2007, revealing that Matthew Podak's system contained a large amount of ethylene glycol, the active ingredient found in antifreeze. Holly confided in her new lover, Charles Lipham, that Matthew might have intentionally taken something to end his life. The autopsy report revealed that Matthew Podak's death was caused by chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the coroner was unable to determine whether it was an accident, suicide, or homicide. Holly also told Sean Walsh that Matthew had died in an industrial accident, suggesting that a colleague might have poisoned him out of jealousy due to his privileged position as the boss's nephew. However, Matthew's family suspected that the person responsible might have been someone within their inner circle. In 2007, after Holly moved away, detectives visited her former house and seized 2 bottles of antifreeze from the garage, as documented in the police report. Later that year, following her breakup with Charles Lipham, Holly met Jameson Kennedy at the bar where she worked. This was in the spring of 2008. Notably, Holly did not share any information about Matthew's death with Jameson. It is worth mentioning that Jameson Kennedy had a substantial criminal record and struggled with alcohol and drug abuse. One day in September 2008, Holly and Jameson were together, drinking and intimate, when Holly became emotional and started discussing Matthew. She broke down in tears, saying she wanted to escape the situation and leave Cleveland behind. She expressed regret over what had happened. Jameson asked her what she was sorry about, and Holly confided that she had tampered with Matthew's drinks, causing him to fall ill over time and eventually leading to his death. Jameson was unsure if she was telling the truth. Following Holly's confession, Jameson met with an old friend, Santiago Feliciano, a lawyer. Jameson shared Holly's admission with Santiago, who advised him to report the information to the authorities if he believed it to be true. After Jameson discussed Holly's confession with her, he called her to clarify the details. But during their phone conversation, Holly vehemently denied ever harming Matthew, accusing Jameson of misquoting her. She insisted she never told him about putting anything in his drink and would never do such a thing. The incident marked the beginning of the end of their relationship. Jameson accused Holly of cheating on him on November 8, 2008, and confronted her at her house to discuss his suspicions. Feeling scared, Holly called the police. When the officers arrived, Jameson attacked them, leading to his arrest and charge of assault. Jameson Kennedy was later found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison for assaulting the officers. Not only that, but after his arrest, he also informed the police about Holly's alleged confession. He refused to protect the person responsible for his own arrest. As a result, more and more evidence pointed to Holly McPhee's involvement in Matthew Podolak's death. The police initially investigated Matthew's death in 2007, following the release of the autopsy report. However, they did not initially suspect foul play, which led to a lengthy delay in the case. Let's examine the autopsy report in more detail. As a seasoned forensic pathologist and medical examiner with over 10 years of experience, Dr. Galita's job involved performing autopsies and determining the causes and nature of death. With more than 3,500 autopsies under his belt, he was well equipped to conduct the autopsy on Podolak, which he did the day after Podolak's death. 6 months after the incident, in January 2007, the autopsy report detailing the findings was released. The report, which was signed by the doctor and the county coroner, Dr. Elizabeth Balge, concluded that Tupac's death was caused by chronic intoxication due to ethylene glycol, although the manner in which this occurred remained undetermined. Dr. Galita explains that the ethylene glycol Matthew Podolak ingested entered his bloodstream and was quickly metabolized by alcohol dehydrogenase in his liver. This enzyme facilitates certain chemical reactions in the body. The resulting metabolite was converted into oxalate, which then combined with calcium to form calcium oxalate crystals. A large quantity of these crystals accumulated in Matthew's kidneys, hindering their proper function. Dr. Galita stated that Matthew's flank pain, which began in May 2006, was caused by crystals in his kidneys. An examination of Matthew's kidneys revealed not only damage, but also signs of the kidneys attempting to heal. Additionally, Dr. Galita discovered crystals in Matthew's heart and brain and diagnosed him with severe acute myocarditis, an acute inflammation of the heart muscle. According to Dr. Galita, Matthew's myocarditis could not have developed from a single instance of ethylene glycol ingestion, but rather required at least 3 weeks to develop. Furthermore, Dr. Galita ruled out the possibility that Matthew had suffered a heart attack. Dr. Galita reached the conclusion that Matthew's death was caused by long-term poisoning from ethylene glycol. She believed that this poisoning happened due to a series of acute but non-fatal intoxications that occurred over a period of at least 3 months. Matthew's friends stated that his go-to drink was raspberry iced tea, which he would often bring to work in a thermos or in its original packaging, whether it was a half-gallon or whole-gallon container. According to his friend Michael Mahal, Holly McFeature would occasionally bring Matthew lunch at work, and it would always come with a half-gallon or whole-gallon container of iced tea. In August 2007, the police collected 2 bottles of antifreeze, one from Peak and one from Saturn, from the garage of McFeature's former home. This was 3 years after she had moved out, and also after the autopsy results had been released in 2010. The coroner's report was later amended, and Dr. Frank Miller, the then county coroner, signed off on the updated document. Although the cause of death remained the same, the amended report changed the manner of death from undetermined to homicide, concluding that Podolak's death was a result of chronic ethylene glycol intoxication and was indeed a homicide. 6 years after Matthew Podolak's death, the authorities finally decided to arrest Holly McFeature in connection with his passing. In July 2012, they charged her with 2 counts, aggravated deprivation of Matthew's life and contaminating a substance for human consumption or use. Matthew's older brother, Mark Podolak, revealed that his family had long suspected McFeature's involvement in his brother's death, citing her unusual behavior. She didn't seem like someone who was grieving or about to lose a loved one. The investigators believed that Holly had been secretly adding antifreeze to Matthew's cold raspberry tea over a period of weeks or even months. She pleaded not guilty to the charges and appeared in court in 2013. The case against Holly rested solely on circumstantial evidence. During the trial, the prosecution called 15 witnesses, including Matthew's family and friends, Dr. Galita, Dr. Thomas Mandat, Matthew's doctor, and several police officers involved in the investigation. These witnesses testified about Holly's behavior, a phone call Matthew made before visiting the doctor, and the fact that Matthew had not owned a working boat since 2004, so he had no reason to use antifreeze for that purpose. Holly's lawyers claimed that Matthew's family and friends were convinced of her guilt and immediately launched a vigorous campaign targeting law enforcement agencies to ensure she was brought to justice after his death. The state's primary witness was Dr. Galita, the medical examiner who performed the autopsy on Matthew's body. During his extensive testimony, Dr. Galita explained how he arrived at the conclusion that Matthew had been subjected to chronic poisoning over a period of 3 months. He pointed out that he discovered crystals in Matthew's kidneys and cardiac myocarditis, both of which can be caused by exposure to ethylene glycol. He ruled out other possible causes of myocarditis, including bacterial, fungal, and viral infections. Furthermore, Dr. Galita testified that if Matthew had experienced a single acute exposure to ethylene glycol, myocarditis would not have developed. Galita clarified why he altered the original autopsy report 3 years later. At the time in 2007, the coroner's office lacked sufficient information to conclude that the death was a result of intentional life deprivation, so the manner of death was initially classified as undetermined. The testimonies of other witnesses supported Dr. Galita's findings on the cause of death. Matthew's friends testified that Podolak's health started to decline in the spring of 2006, and he was diagnosed with kidney stones in July of that year, with his health continuing to deteriorate afterwards. As for the relationship between Podolak and McFeature, the state's witnesses stated that it had become increasingly volatile. Matthew seemed fearful, and one of his friends even advised him to take his weapons out of the house, which he did. Holly's lawyers claim their client was not responsible for Matthew's death. They suggested that Matthew, who was struggling with depression due to online gambling losses, work issues, and communication problems with his young child, intentionally took a lethal dose of antifreeze. The defense also argued that Matthew died from a single dose, rather than multiple doses taken over several weeks or months. To support this, they presented Dr. Robert Bucks, the coroner from El Paso County, Colorado. He testified that Matthew suffered from acute poisoning, which indicated a one-time ingestion of ethylene glycol and suggested that Matthew wanted to end his life. Dr. Bucks disagreed with Dr. Galita's finding of myocarditis, instead believing Matthew had a heart attack. He also stated that a person can have myocarditis without ethylene glycol poisoning, and that flank pain is not a symptom of ethylene glycol poisoning. Additionally, Dr. Bucks claimed there was no connection between kidney stones and ethylene glycol poisoning. The state presented evidence that despite struggling with depression, Matthew was dedicated to being a good father to his children and had made plans with them as recently as the day before his death. Additionally, there was evidence that he had sought medical help for both his mental and physical health issues. One key witness at the trial was Jamison Kennedy, who both asserted that Holly had confessed to them that she had mixed something into Matthew's drinks. Kennedy was brought to the courtroom from prison, where he was serving a 10-year sentence for assaulting police officers. He repeated his claim that Holly had confessed to him about her involvement in Matthew's death, but Holly denied making such a statement. Despite Kennedy's questionable credibility, the court transcript shows that Sergeant Michael Quinn testified that when Kennedy initially told the authorities about Holly's confession, there was no public knowledge that Matthew had died from ethylene glycol poisoning. This suggests that Kennedy's information did not come from elsewhere, contradicting Holly's claim. Holly claimed that Kennedy had given her a choice: either receive leniency in her criminal case or exact revenge on her. After deliberating for 3 days, the jury delivered a verdict on August 28, 2013, finding Holly guilty on all counts. The court subsequently sentenced her to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. This case relied solely on circumstantial evidence and witness testimonies. In your opinion, was Holly truly guilty? Is it plausible that Matthew intentionally consumed antifreeze for 3 months in an attempt to harm himself? Hello, friend. Remorse or pangs of conscience. He spoke differently and coldly about his murder, did not apologize, and did not explain the motive for his terrible act. The court sentenced the murderer to life in prison without parole. Elizabeth's family members, although they considered such a sentence rather mild, noted that they forgive Rudolph because they do not want their hearts to boil with hatred. Her parents and sisters are now responsible for the upbringing of Elizabeth woman's children. Even though Elizabeth is no longer here, everyone in her family and community will always remember her. She was a lovely, lovely mother. I want to say a lovely daughter too. She was basically my daughter. She had the ultimate respect for me, as I did for her, said her stepfather Fidel Galvan in 2016.